Hello and welcome to the Dissidents Podcast, brought to you by the Institute for Liberal Values. This is where we talk about how we can strive for a world in which freedom and reason are at the forefront of all human society. In this week's podcast, Elizabeth Spivak and Mike Burke have received a book. We have been given a book that we weren't supposed to be given. I think it's a bit generous to call it a book. It's more like a pamphlet. And this pamphlet is an example of the kind of coercive workplace indoctrination that is going on all across America and beyond. And what we are going to do is we are going to go through the book blow by blow and dissect it, show you the one or two places where we might agree with what the author has to say, and then literally pick apart the arguments, pick apart the evidence, pick apart the bad reasoning. So you will be able to use this. This will be very useful for you. You will be able to use this and push back against all of the dumbed down bad ideas that you are likely to be exposed to. It will be a blow by blow, because these arguments are just everywhere. It will be a blow by blow analysis of what to do when you come across these arguments and these kinds of indoctrination sessions in your workplace. It's long, but we think it's worth it. Anything to add, Elizabeth?
Hopefully it will save the time that we put in before this and during will actually save people time and angst when they're thinking about their own situations, which invariably all of us are faced with. So.
Yeah, this will be a resource that you can share with people. You can break it up. You don't have to listen to it in one go. Use the pause button, but it will be a resource that you can share because lots of people are coming up against these ideas, and we will really forensically show you just how awful they are and how to rebut them.
And if you have some example that you want to send us,
please,
we're happy to anonymously go through others.
We are quite openly soliciting appalling works of this kind,
or good examples.
Or good examples.
If there's one out there.
If there's one out there. And most certainly this isn't one. So yes, hopefully you'll enjoy it. We laughed a lot at the poor author's expense. We hope you'll laugh a lot at the poor author's expense and find it useful. Good. So on with the show. Hello and welcome back. Usual preamble, if you're on YouTube, leave a comment, share. Comments come up in my notifications, so if you say something, I will talk to you about it. If you're on Twitter, share. If you're listening on audio, write a review, share, that kind of thing. Anything to get it out there helps. We are, I hope, one of the few voices resisting the woke lot who are still liberal. Who haven't completely gone on the conservative bandwagon, and we all need an in-group. We all need a kind of a team of people. So if you're feeling homeless, let's help each other out in that regard. So that out of the way, amidst all of the madness erupting concerning Israel, Palestine, outpourings of support for terrorism on campus, which is something we're exploring in a series of podcasts. We thought we might have a little bit of comic relief.
Yes, we got an anonymous tip that we should look at something, and so I sent it to you. I sent it to you a couple of weeks ago, and you were like, "Oh, we have to do this." We have to talk about this.
I mean, seldom do you find, when sometimes, because there is some interesting scholarship that comes from the family of ideas that you would call critical race theory. And I've been at pains to say that you don't have to accept everything that they're saying, but it's worth considering, and that some of these people deserve a seat at the table. And the defenders of the more nuanced version of critical race theory will always say, well, look, point to this, and this dumbed down stuff, this is a right-wing fantasy. And in some cases it is a right-wing fantasy, but in some cases it really is that bad, where people really are just saying some of the most inane things. And today we have an example of that. And again, why And why would we critique this? Why is it just, no, this is an outlier, this is stupid? It's because actually the dumbed down, inane form of the arguments are often the most persuasive. And one important reason for that is because people don't have the concentration span for the more sophisticated stuff. So they're happy to pick up, in this case, what is it the author calls it?
The Anti-Racism Fight Club.
It's the Anti-Racism Fight Club.
And it's called the Fist Book. So, and it's fine to, one of the reasons why this was forwarded to us is because an organization paid this person a good deal of money. I mean, I've looked at his speakers page, the Speakers Bureau page or whatever, and it's anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000. And he's been on NPR and either NBC or I think CBS, and he's this is something that people are hiring this person to come to their organization and do anti-racism training, bias awareness training, and so clearly some people are taking this quite seriously. And so while it makes you and I kind of laugh, and anyone who's seen Fight Club, I mean, it's like, or read it or whatever, it's like the first rule about Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. So I'm not really sure,
yeah, but also who's fighting? How are they fighting? You going there to fight about who's the wokest of them all? I mean, I
think so. I think maybe a little bit, yeah. So by the way, this person's, I just want to tell you that his name is spelled Doyin, but it's pronounced Doyin.
Of course it is.
Doyin Richards.
No, of course it is. Of course it is.
He's listed as, I want to give credit where credit is due. He's listed as a best-selling author. I looked it up. He's the author of 2 children's picture books.
Okay.
And about one of them's about sort of a fictional little children's story about his father's immigration and subsequent, rise to, he actually got his PhD somewhere. And the father, not Doyin, not Doyin, but his father. And I'm not sure what his father would think about this. It makes me think a little bit about Wink, and what would, like his father might be, maybe, I don't know, maybe his father would be closer to like your parents' age. So that's the best-selling author piece. And some of the reviews of the book, I mean, I didn't read them, but they're quite positive. But the ones that are not positive do mention a bit of an axe to grind, and that maybe children wouldn't understand something that says, don't be colorblind, that maybe the author is sort of like letting out maybe. But many of the reviews are quite positive. And again, he's been on some of the television shows. He has a TEDx, so not a real TED Talk, but one of those TEDx talks. I did watch it. 53 people, now 54, have watched it. So 54, including me. So he has about as many, watchers as we do, I suppose.
Probably.
Yeah.
We make $10,000 per speech, do we?
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And I one of the things I do want to contrast, before we get into these materials, I was really struck by the contrast between his TED Talk, which we can link in the podcast notes, and Coleman Hughes's TED Talk. So Doyin Richards does on his TED Talk talks about sort of the burdens of being a person of color, and his struggles with mental health, which he describes as an outcome of that. I mean, one of the things he says that he was he says this in the TED Talks, I'm not speaking out of turn, that he, a few years ago, considered killing himself because he couldn't control something that he believed he was hated for, so his race. So he mentions that, at equality is life or death, and that you are either against him or you are with him. And that's sort of this, sort of like the Fight Club kind of, So he would consider us against him, which makes me sad, right? I do understand the mentality because I feel that way about my own workplace right now. You're either with me or against me. And, so I understand the mentality. And by the way, the title of his TED Talk is Racism from the Perspective of a Non-Threatening Black Man.
Okay.
Although he does describe himself as a threatening Black man in the talk, like in his neighborhood, he talks about, there was a sketch of a person that went out because someone had raped a woman, and he was concerned and stayed in the house. So he sees himself both as threatening and non-threatening, and sort of, trying to figure that, that out. So he's a very sort of sympathetic speaker in that way. But he does present this idea that no one else could have possibly experienced tragedy or trauma or daily upset, whether that's microaggressions or worse, than someone like himself. And I find that a bit, it's hard for me to sort of come around to his side when I feel like there's a lot of pain to go around in this world, and to suggest that no one could have experienced pain in the same way or felt. He describes himself as an empath who feels things very deeply, and that's I can't imagine that he's that unique in that feeling things deeply.
He describes himself as an empath. Is described the right verb here? Is it boast would be more appropriate?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So
he boasts that he's an empath.
Yeah. So again, like I would describe some of his descriptions to me were like, oh, I actually can. I have an experience that's certainly not the same, but maybe maybe similar feelings about something that I felt really upset by. He again, he describes like not leaving his house because he felt that he shouldn't while this sketch was out, because he lives in a primarily white neighborhood, and the person was described as being Black. And I mean, I certainly was told that as a woman, there's certain places or things. I was running in a park when I first moved here, and I was told not to run in that park anymore, because as a woman, I might be, in danger. So there are places maybe that women can't go sometimes. Maybe they don't necessarily feel confined to their home. But what about someone who was a victim of family violence or something, and feels like they can't? I just felt it was very exclusionary, that no one else feels the way that a Black man does, kind of thing.
I mean, yeah, I've been turned down for jobs because I'm not Japanese. That's happened to me.
Sure.
Where the person who was doing the recruiting favored me as a candidate, and then his boss said, no, we don't have enough Japanese people here, so we have to recruit somebody who's Japanese. I have been turned down for apartments because I'm not Japanese. One of the funniest ones is I walked into a letting agent, and the guy just looks at me and went
Not happening, huh? Yeah.
That was the only explanation I got. I frequently, when traveling in Tokyo, even on a packed train, frequently the only seat going will be next to me and no one will take it. Sometimes I don't, if there is a free seat on a packed train, even though I've got a huge commute, sometimes I won't take that seat because I know that I will make I don't know. I strongly suspect.
You don't know. Yeah.
I strongly suspect that I'll make the person next to me uncomfortable. I've been profiled for crimes, including quite embarrassingly randomly searched at a major train station called Machida in Tokyo, one of the busiest train stations in the world. It's in the top 20, by police who said, "Do you have a knife?" My response was, "Yes, but not with me."
Yeah. Well, and
I'm so
yeah.
so. It's not just Black people that are on the receiving end of racism. I've been traumatized by racism. The first woman I fell in love with was a Chinese woman, and basically, this was age 21 or something like that, and basically the relationship had to end because her family didn't want her marrying somebody who wasn't Chinese, which is, one of the most painful events of my life. Something like that took me years to get over. In many ways, it would have been less traumatic if she had have died because she was still out there, right?
Right.
So
And,
I have been traumatized by racism.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
Well, and I was thinking, like, in many ways, I've been traumatized by racism. Why?
You have,
because I've been labeled one, and you cannot you can't get rid of that. Just like he can't get rid of being. Now, maybe I could move, and maybe someone wouldn't know, that kind of thing. But, essentially, to this sort of like you're either with me or against me is very much the way so the sort of socio-political culture sort of describes things now, and maybe they think that well, I shouldn't say maybe, most likely maybe I deserve, they believe I deserve that, and that's the price that that people like us who's
you've done nothing wrong.
Right, but
nothing.
That's what we pay because there's racism. So I wanted to say, like, I wanted to point people also to Coleman Hughes's TED Talk, which was sort of marginalized. Like they tried to cancel it, and and all that kind of stuff. So there's been a lot of talk. So his like 273,000 people have watched his, even though it's, you have to search for it. It wasn't released on time with some of the others in the package and that kind of stuff, but it is there and you can watch it. And his, talk is about colorblindness, and actually, saying that, many people are talking about colorblindness like it's a dirty word, sort of like Doyin is. So Coleman is saying, just like colorblindness doesn't mean not seeing color, sort of like warm-heartedness doesn't mean you have a hot heart. Right, like this, it's a term. And he actually, I don't know the history of this, but he actually says that the term was originated by a guy named Wendell Phillips in 1865. He called for the federal government to become colorblind. It was part of the anti-slavery movement. So he talks about class as a better proxy for privilege, which we talked about with Will Reily. And actually, Will Reily has been on Coleman Hughes's podcast also. And he gives some examples in his about, of the restaurant revitalization project, which was a pandemic pool of money that was offered first only to to people of color, and until it went to court, and then the whole thing just it fell apart. And he also talks about cameras that catch people speeding and I don't know, other traffic kind of things. And, he was saying, if there's all this racism in policing, then we should do more traffic cameras because a camera doesn't know how to be racist. But unfortunately, a lot of people are against them because guess what? They do not catch people in statistically equal numbers. So, people are pushing back. So anyway, I would point people, we'll link both of those, but I encourage people to sort of listen to both or watch both, whichever, and kind of compare and contrast and think about which one might bring people together and to really talk openly about race and, race and relationships between people. Because I personally would say that it would be Coleman's colorblindness one. So with that in mind, I also did, I did my little due diligence and like I said, looked up a few interviews and stuff, because we didn't really know exactly why we got this other than Anti-Racism Fight Club with the fist. Yeah. The TEDx talk is mild compared to what's in this.
Yeah, it's
book.
funny. People tend to be, and me too, by the way. I tend to be, people always say about me, oh, you're so pleasant in person, yet when you're online, like you're just out for blood, which, when I'm writing, I'm far more kind of binary.
Inflammatory.
Inflammatory. I don't give a crap.
But this was actually used, I think, in a, in a institutional training, I don't see this as bringing people together. So anyway, we can start with just the picture on the front.
Yeah, so the picture on the front has a circle, anti-racism, fight club, and kind of like stamped on lettering, and like a fist like this. And it's in black, white, and red. Like red, obviously, seeming to symbolize blood.
Mm-hmm.
The second
sort
flag
of graffiti looking.
Yeah.
A little bit.
The second page seems to have a Japanese flag on there, but I don't think that's intentional.
No.
No part of this publication may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any forms by any means. Well, somebody sent it to us.
Yes.
We've not sent it to anybody else.
No. And we're not going to share it here or anything like that. We're just going to discuss.
No, but I would say, if you're...
It's probably findable.
It's probably findable, yeah. And if you're... And I think that if he's confident in his stuff, he should share his work. And it begins, if you're reading this, it means that you've successfully completed your anti-racism fight club initiation. Congratulations! However, your work is just beginning. This fist book with a capital F, TM.
Trademarked, yes.
Oh my God. Will be a helpful tool as you travel down the road of becoming an anti-racist. Let's go! In capital letters. And then he quotes himself. I mean, who quotes themselves? I mean, just the narcissism needed to quote yourself. Unattributed as well, which just, like, it's so important. It's just, anti-racism work is often messy, uncomfortable, and confrontational. But do you know what else it is? Question mark. Necessary. Doyin, is it he calls himself? Richards. I'm going to call him Dolly.
Doyin.
Doyin. So, do you want to have a look at his definition of racism?
Sure. So he's got a picture of sort of like the online, version. And then he says, here's a definition that I created. So a political, economic, or social system in which a dominant race uses its power and influence to oppress others of different races. And he does say that means that BIPOC cannot be racist against white people because there is no construct in America where we hold power or influence over white people. Now, I beg to differ.
There's not.
I beg to differ.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I understand what he means, but that is certainly not the experience. I think if you ask many, especially maybe, for example, let's just say we asked the people who went to this training, right?
Yeah.
If we could, which we can't because we don't know who did it, who went to it, but we would say to ourselves, we would ask them, do you feel that, that you hold power or influence over Black people? And I think they would go, hell no.
No.
I'm, this is, look, I'm either with him or against him. I don't know how to be with him exactly. So I guess he considers me against him because I can't change my
Therefore,
skin
you're
color.
a racist.
So I'm a racist, so I'm against him and I'm scared. So, I don't know.
But also it's such, okay, so, the conceptualization of power is so stupid. Like, power is not an unyielding piece of granite. Do you know what I mean? It is something that is fluid. It changes. So if you are let's think about a kind of person in society who you would regard as having a lot of power. How about a judge? Yeah, would you consider a judge has a lot of power?
Sure.
And then I don't know, somebody who might not have a lot of power. Let's take race out of the equation. Let's say we are in a small town in the Bible Belt, right? The judge has a lot of power, not just because of his actual power as mandated by law in the courtroom, but also because he is well respected within the community, liked as a person, and so on, has probably done a lot of work. That kind of thing.
A religious leader would have a lot of power?
Okay, well, even better. Let's say a religious leader. In fact, we could give you an example. Let's say somebody like Ted Haggard. Do you know who Ted Haggard was?
No, I do not.
Okay, Ted Haggard was this, I think he's still alive. I say I think he's still alive. He should definitely be alive based on his age, but because of what happened to him, I have no idea. He might have, he was one of the most influential evangelical preachers in the United States of America. Very, 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 very charismatic. I don't want to defame him here, so I'm just going to check this. So excuse me for the keyboard typing sounds. Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Go on. You were saying?
Oh, I was just going to read the rest of while you were typing. So he says, if we did hold power and influence, racism would have ended centuries ago. Again, historically, I beg to differ. Right? There are, many, many, many historical examples of Black, brown, people of color holding power and actually participating in, say, slavery and
Benin. The Benin slave trade is a classic. That's one of the best examples. Would be the Benin slave trade, to the extent that the British tried to actually stop it, and the Benin people, or the king of Benin or whatever at the time, basically turned around and said, no, look, it's part of our culture. There was even like a narrative that he gave. It was the mother lulls her baby to sleep with stories of our warriors enslaving blacks, and then they had this other blacks, and they had this tree in the center of a kind of courtyard in which the slaves would be made. It was called the Tree of Forgetfulness, in which the slaves would be meant to walk around it in the belief that the magical power of the tree would make them forget where they came from, so they wouldn't come back and seek revenge. And the British, at great cost, turned up and said, no, you're going to stop this barbaric practice right now. And then there was a to and fro, and eventually they said yes, and they kind of resumed again, and the British were happy to go to war over something like that. So the British Empire, for all the criticism it rightly draws, spent a lot of money, and you know, a lot of British sailors died in order to put the Atlantic slave trade to an end. And that's actually true. But, you know, again, that's not something that's told to you by this kind of Manichaean black and white, good and evil. It's always the oppressors and the oppressed. And, you know, there's never this notion that actually that there is moral complexity here.
Right.
You know, and there really is, because, you know, why don't we hear about the Arabic slave trade? Do you know about that?
I have heard of it, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know any details, but I certainly knew it existed.
Okay, so why do we have the descendants of slaves in America? Can you answer that question? Why do we still have
Oh,
the... It's quite simple. It's not a trick question.
no, I thought you were just going to keep going. Like, why do we have? And then you just
it's not a trick question. I mean, why do we have the descendants of slaves in America?
Again, I thought you were just going to keep going.
Because they had children, right? You know,
Right.
help me out here. Because they had children. Whereas in the Arabic world, they were castrated. And so they didn't have children, so their descendants aren't there right now. And yet that's never talked about, even though that was a greater evil, very arguably. So anyway, you know, somebody like a Ted Haggard, who was a religious thought leader, he lost all of his power because he was involved with gay prostitutes. It was found out. So power for him was not monolithic. As soon as it was transitory, it changes, right? It changed throughout his life. And the same thing is true for black individuals or black people in general. You know, racism is not... the power of racism ebbs and waxes dependent upon the era. And I think that the number of people today who are racist against black people is historically quite low. It may have taken an uptick recently ironically, because of all this critical social justice being forced down people's throats and people being told that they ought to identify with their ethnicity. But just quickly go back to the judge idea. So, you know, so we've got like the historical waxing and waning of a person's power based upon their actions in life. But even contextually, so the judge is the most powerful person in the courtroom, and within the community he has a lot of power. Then let's say he gets off work and he goes home to have a drink in his local bar. He's no longer the most powerful person in that context. You know, the owner of the bar, who would not be powerful overall, you know, if you looked at the overall, his comings and going throughout his life, would not be a powerful person. But within the context of the bar, he has the ability to eject the judge at his whim. So this idea that power is just fixed and black people don't have power, it's like, well, what do you mean by that? Institutionally, black people have a lot of power. Hip-hop music, for example, is a kind of what we would call soft power, right? It's a kind of cultural power that makes black people seem cool in the eyes of some people. That's a kind of power. So this idea that black people don't have power, sports or intellectuals. There are plenty of influential black intellectuals, and I'm not just talking about woke ones either. In fact, you know, the likes of Thomas Sowell, Will Reily, Coleman, Hughes.
I was going to bring up,
just go on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
But,
Well, I was going to bring up, you know, Glenn Lowery and John McWhorter. The other day, I don't know, a week or so ago, we're talking about the Ibram Kendi thing at, you know, here, because, you know, I live near that area. And, you know, just the whole, you know, collapse of the center and potential collapse of the center. And I really saw a parallel here, because I was thinking about, you know, Doyin, and Glenn Lowery and John McWhorter were a bit at odds, because Glenn Lowery was feeling very unforgiving, okay, about this whole thing. It's like Ibram X Kendi didn't have any experience. He never should have, agreed, to take on a project of this size. The money that came in. He was, he happened to have written a couple of books in advance of the George Floyd thing, and he sort of, came to prominence in part because of that, and so he suddenly found himself, at the center of this. But Glenn Lowery is just like, what a load of crap, and everything. And John McWhorter was like, oh, like who would turn that down? Right. So he had written a couple of books. People were coming to him. People were telling him he was great, that this is this big contribution that he can make. Who would turn that down? And I feel a little bit that way about Doyin Richards and his,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel a little bit like, oh, here's a person who has this opportunity. He's got an undergraduate in psychology. That's his, his training. That's it, and so it's not like I don't know how he got into this, but people are offering him $10,000 to $20,000 to do it. I mean, why would he say no? It's like, yay. Now, again, I can go the other side and say there's a lot of reasons to say no, but I see the parallel here. It's like there's a lot to criticize here, and there's a lot to be I don't know, frustrated and angry about. And then I also see the other side where it's like, for crying out loud, if an organization is willing to pay you that much money, if CBS calls, if NPR calls,
But this, okay, I'm fine with him accepting $20,000. Should he do it morally? Probably not. Right. Can I condemn him for it?
Not really. Yeah.
No, come on. And look, best of luck to him. He's probably not evil. I think that
he thinks we're evil, though. I suspect.
I bet you he doesn't. I bet he would say.
I don't know. We're with him or against him, and he says it multiple times.
Yeah, all right. Get me in a room with him one-on-one, and then let's see if he calls me evil to my face.
True. Yeah.
Because he's not going to do that. Are you?
Yeah.
If you're listening or watching.
Yeah.
You're not. You might do on Twitter, but face to face, one-on-one, you're really not. We'll have a nice chat, and you will be nice. Anyway, look, he I don't hold that against him. I think that a lot of harm is done by people who intend good. I'm not even sure he intends good, and by not sure, I'm not sure. I don't know.
Right.
Or people who are just kind of indifferent. They're kind of like, I don't want to do any harm. I don't particularly want to do any good. I just want to make a buck, as you Americans would say.
Right.
And I'm fine with that too. Not because I think it's morally permissible, but because there are a few people who wouldn't take the $20,000, right? And so therefore I don't want to condemn the majority of humanity.
I mean, I do think that there's some potentially, I don't know, I hate to use the word harmful, but some potentially.
Oh no, I definitely think there are. I think there's a lot of harmful stuff in here.
Yeah.
I just don't want to condemn him.
Yeah. On page, this is actually officially page 2, even though. So he has the Ku Klux Klan. You got your little clip art there of the Ku Klux Klan. A Klansman. And he says, oftentimes people want to believe that white supremacy is simply a bunch of knuckleheads in white hoods and white hooded robes yelling white power, but that's not it. Just like our telephones, cars, and clothes have evolved, white supremacy and racism have evolved as well. It's now an infrastructure where thoughts, ideals, and the actions of white people in the U.S. are viewed as normal, correct, valuable, and American. So here are a few examples. And the examples are white supremacy in schools, white supremacy in the justice system, white supremacy in healthcare. And that's the extent. I mean, now maybe in actual training, he talks about Those, I don't know, but those are, the fact he just essentially says that there it is. It's there.
I can guess where he's going to go with this. He links to it. There are hyperlinks if you click on the.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's not clear. If you hover over the images, it will hyperlink to articles.
Oh, New York Times. Okay, I see now. Okay,
but one of them is dead. Okay, so the New York Times, his example for racist in the justice system. This is worse than I thought it would be. So what I thought he would do. No, yeah, it's worse. So what I thought he would do would be to post to a link that would show a disproportionate number of black people in prison, for example, which I think is a problem because I do have a problem with the war on drugs and people being imprisoned for ridiculous amounts of time, and then
drugs that are now legal, by the way.
Right, and exactly, especially right, and then the kids growing up in a home without a father, which we know, regardless of ethnicity, very, very much predicts for a likely unsuccessful future for those kids. So I'm very, very sympathetic to that. But I thought he would go down that route,
right?
Because disproportionately black people suffer. Now, again, that doesn't show that the justice system is racist. It just shows a disproportionate outcome. And by the way, again, one that I have a problem with. So that's where I thought it was going to go.
We should also refer people to the Will Reily podcast that we did that, where that's sort of.
Yeah. I mean, okay, we'll link to the Will Reily podcast that we did. Basically, I mean, what Will Reily, who's an African-American academic, does is he looks at this argument that says, okay, there are unequal outcomes in the judicial system, and he, as a political scientist, breaks them down from a statistical point of view, and makes the argument that essentially these are largely not caused by racism. But anyway, I thought he would go down that route, but he's not going down that route. What he's going down is he's going down a very, very, very stupid route, much more stupid than that. I'm sorry, but it is stupid. So the link to the article is, he links to an article by the New York Times that says vile racist postings by New York court officers included Obama in a noose. Okay.
Oh.
Now,
is that offensive? Yes.
Is it racist? Possibly. I mean, you might dislike Obama and want to put him in a noose, not because you're racist, just because some other reason. I don't know.
It might not have been a white person, supposedly, that it might have been a black person.
I don't know, but let's say it is. Let's just give him all of that. Let's say that there are 50 New York court officers, and they were all drawing pictures of Obama in a noose because they all hate black people. It doesn't follow from that the whole of the American extreme. And that's an extreme, right? And almost certainly that's not the case. Almost certainly we're talking about one or two nutters doing something questionable. And fine. I mean, I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist and it shouldn't be tackled. Of course it does. And it's vile, it's abhorrent, and we all believe that. But 50 again, let's say it's 50, and they are all Zeke Highland, goose stepping to Wagner in their back gardens on Sundays, and the full 9 yards, as you Americans like to say. Even if that was true, it would not follow that would be sufficient evidence to conclude that the whole of the NYPD or the American court, the New York court system was racist, let alone the whole judicial system. So this is not this evidence, and I've amplified the evidence by many times, does not support the claim that he's making, right? So, the fact that you can glibly link to an article like that and use that as evidence to, in a way that says, you must accept this as evidence, and if you don't, you're a racist, right? Because he is saying that either you're against me or you're with me. Yeah. He's saying, so you have to, in order to be an anti-racist, not know what evidence means. So being an anti-racist requires not being able to do basic critical thinking. I mean, really basic critical thinking. Okay, so that's the New York Times article on white supremacy and justice.
Okay.
So if I click on the schools one, I just get error.
Okay.
So I presume that's Yeah,
That's
I just
just a
tried
broken
again. It's
link.
gone.
Yeah.
It's a broken link. But of course, charity, links break, and we
Oh
forgive
yeah,
people
we
for
don't know
breaking
when
links.
this. We don't know. I mean, we were
No,
sent that.
and
We
and
don't
and
know
even
when
if
this
you did it,
was.
even if you did it last week, the link can still be broken. And
Oh right,
you
yeah,
having a broken link
yeah, is
in your
not
work, there's no basis for criticizing
right.
somebody because they had
Yeah,
a
because it's
broken
not
link.
your responsibility to make
No.
sure that links work. Yeah.
And anybody who would criticize people for having broken links in their work, something that's completely outside of their responsibility, is frankly a bit of an idiot. I'm just wondering, do you know anybody who would do something like
I
that?
do. I do.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Do you think they would be as critical as the broken link in this, or do you think they'd be, oh
Oh
no, oh no, of course,
no,
broken link is not your responsibility? Do
that
you think
would
there'd be any
never happen.
consistency there?
No, I do
No,
not.
I don't.
No.
But you notice how we are able to be consistent and
Yes.
charitable. Did you find that difficult?
No, I did not find it
No,
difficult to be charitable about that. No, because it's not
no.
your responsibility to ensure that the links of a New York Times article
And
works.
of
It's
course,
the New York Times.
they would be perfectly able to articulate that point of view and go along with it strongly. Absolutely. If it was
And you know
something that
what?
they agreed with.
If he'd actually described in here, and if he'd actually put the citation in here, you know what else we could do? We could
We
go
could
look it
have
up.
we could have found it.
Yeah.
Almost certainly we could have found it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yes, there is a function
Mhm.
for citations.
Yes.
Sometimes there
Yeah.
is. Sometimes
Yeah.
people just put them in to look clever, but occasionally it's actually quite useful. Surprise, surprise. Not that many academics would know that, but there we are. Okay, so the next is a blog by Harvard.
Oh.
Racism and discrimination in healthcare providers and patients. Let me just get the gist of it. Yeah. So it starts off with an anecdote. A patient of mine shared a story that she went to visit an emergency room. The emergency room staff did not only treat her pain, but she recounted they treated like I was trying to play them, like I was trying to get pain meds out of them. They didn't make any diagnosis or help me at all. They couldn't get rid of me fast enough. So again, extending charity to this unknown patient, and presuming that the secondhand story is true and not a lot has been lost in Chinese whispers, because if you've played Chinese whispers.
I haven't. I don't know what that is.
Oh, you don't? It's an English thing.
No. Is that
All
just
right.
like is that what we would call like telephone? Like
I
where
don't
we
know.
would like whisper into some, and then like
Yes.
how the message gets distorted. I've never heard that called Chinese whispers.
That's what we used to call it in the UK, and this is the first time I've used the term since I was a child, and I actually played it. So you say something, and then at the end you figure out, and it's something quite different, right?
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, we used to call it Chinese whispers. I mean, I bet you can't call it Chinese whispers anymore, right?
No,
No,
that's
probably not.
racist.
That's racist. Whatever. Anyway, what do you call it in America?
We called it the telephone game. So, it was so.
Okay,
Yeah.
telephones.
I mean, maybe other people called it other things,
Right. Okay. But you know the game. So you whisper
Yeah.
something, you get around 20 people, and then, or however many people, and then the last person says the message, and it's always changed in some funny way.
Completely. Yeah. Sometimes completely different.
Right. And that is how memory works as well. It's not just misinterpretation. Things change, events change. So when this doctor is saying, my patient experienced this and they recounted this to me, there's a hell of a lot of potential for the message to be confused. So it's kind of a weird thing to start with that kind of thing as an anecdote, but okay, let's say on this rare occasion he has perfect recollection and the patient has perfect recollection. She simply says she was in a medical room and the staff weren't pleasant to her.
Right. I hear this.
Is that racism?
Yeah, I'm going to use an educational example of this because we hear this all the time, and you might at your school too. So we hear all the time that that the school is racist because minority students tell stories about how if they went to the registrar's office, then they get told that they need to go to the bursar's office. and then they get told that they need to go to maybe see their advisor or whatever. And so they're getting the runaround, and it's racism. And it's like, but no, actually, that's what happened to me when I was in school. It's what happens to every student. You just go around and everybody, and this is what happens to you even as an adult. If you go to a store now, you get it's like everybody's pointing at everybody else, right? It's somebody else's problem. And you get the runaround. And so, when you're, is it the registrar, or is it the bursar's office, or is it the student, what student affairs office, or the whatever? That's what happens in real life. And that's not racism. That's just what happens to everybody. And this is sort of an example,
like it's not good.
It's not.
It's annoying.
It's not good.
But we get it, and the reason why we get it is because it happens to us too, and we find it annoying. But it, and when I say, look, maybe sometimes it might be motivated by racism. I'm probably
or
sometimes
sexism,
it is,
or some other ism.
Or sexism.
Right.
Although, come on, if it's a bloke, it's unlikely to be sexism. If an attractive female walks in. How can I help you? We have a table right here.
Let me take you to the bursar's office. Yeah.
Lovely to meet you. Anyway, yes. So no, it just seems to. It's purely anecdotal.
Okay.
So it is. Cases like my patients above illustrate the negative assumptions and associations we can label racism. But, quote, most physicians are not explicitly racist and are committed to treating all patients equally. However, they operate in an inherently racist system, is just the assertion. So, yeah, it's more
so this is it's basically an opinion piece. Yeah,
it's standpoint epistemology. I feel racism, therefore I'm correct in that assumption. And if you challenge me, then you are participating in the unequal system that exists. What you need to do is agree with me and therefore challenge it. So it's more of this kind of tyranny of the subjective. So it doesn't, again, there's no empirical evidence for the claims made. It's all about there's nothing. So it's just a blank assertion. So the guy is saying here is white supremacy in healthcare, and he's backing it. That's his assertion. And he's backing it up by somebody asserting something because their patient asserted something.
Right.
And look, even if the patient is correct and had the negative experience that he or she says they did, then is that because of racism?
It may not be racism. Exactly. It may be, perhaps the doctors had, a bad experience with, prescribing pain pills. So if we don't know, like what certainly there's been plenty of oxy lawsuits and such, and so we might, like if somebody said I'm in a lot of pain and I need pain medication, that perhaps the doctor, depending on when this happened, might be like, whoa,
and it might be quite reasonably whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew somebody who sadly died. I mean,
really?
Borderline kind of suicide. I don't know if it was suicide. He was in an extremely bad way because of pain medication. It was completely
I mean, there's just horrible, situations in entire blocks, city blocks, essentially taken over. Well, I should taken over, but I mean, they, just people living in tents or worse.
Oh yeah, I mean, in America, and it was one of the most shocking things I'd ever seen. Like when we were in Denver, and I remember just seeing these zombies, and initially I found them quite scary because they were addled, obviously, and kind of bumbling around the streets. But then I realized that if I wanted to get away from them, a brisk pace would more than suffice.
Right.
Because they were, we wouldn't even have to run, just a brisk pace, because they were that out of it. And most of them were didn't weren't even engaging with reality. They were completely...
And what we saw was nothing compared to
because there were whole streets
compared to San Francisco right now,
wow.
compared to,
that was Denver,
well, even that what they call mass and Cass here in the Boston area. It's not, I mean, people are, 10, 15, 20 people deep for, several blocks. I mean, it's pretty awful. Okay, so on page 3.
So anyway, just
ahead.
to summarize page 2.
Yes.
One broken link, we're not blaming you for that. But the other 2 links, they don't support his allegation that healthcare is white supremacist or that the justice system is white supremacist. And actually, if you wanted to make the case that it was, if I wanted to make the case that either were, I could do a better job than he's done. Right, I really could. Right. I mean, for one thing, I would go to empirical data and I would say, look, there are unequal outcomes, for example, deaths from COVID, and this shows racism. It doesn't, but you would make a more convincing case than just pointing anecdotes, which is all he's done. So even if that one case of those officers was racism, it still wouldn't follow that the system is white supremacist.
Right.
Even if those doctors were racist to the author's patient, and we don't know that they were, but even if they were, it would not follow from that the whole healthcare system is racist. So, he makes 2 assertions and the evidence that he offers doesn't back it up. But again, we're supposed to either be with him or against him, as he says. So therefore, part of a requirement to be anti-racist is to not understand what evidence is and how evidence functions, which is something that you should learn as an undergraduate, but you probably don't anymore, I'm guessing.
I know. Yeah. Don't get me started. Okay, so now he gives us a little timeline. 1965, he says, was the first year that the Civil Rights Act went into effect that made it unlawful to discriminate on the basis of race and gender in America. However, during the 189 years prior, overt white supremacy and racism was the law of the land. That means slavery, segregation, Jim Crow laws, sundown towns, and many more human rights atrocities were viewed as legal. Now let's think about this. Let's say we push the time back to 1619, when Black people were kidnapped and brought here as slaves. In doing so, it shows that overt white supremacy and racism were illegal during 346 years of the 404 years that Black people have lived on this land. That's 86% of the time.
Pause.
Yes.
Who kidnapped these Black people?
That would be Black people. Shh.
And the white people that bought them and took them over to in horrific conditions were also awful.
Yes.
Let's just say they were as bad as each other.
Yeah. It's horrible. Horrible.
But it is a horror story of human beings.
Yes. And America is not alone. Great Britain has their own history, as do many, many other countries. And there's currently slavery going on in the world. There's
actually more slavery now than there was back then, actually, apparently.
Oh, yeah?
According to Amnesty, yeah, there's a lot more.
Okay.
And there's slave markets still in Africa. They still exist. So yeah, slavery is not over.
Wait, would those be some Black people that have power?
Funnily enough, yes. It would. Some awful Black people.
Yes,
because
bad,
it turns out that Black people can be bad and good. Yeah. So it turns out that there are some Black people that I think are horrible human beings. Like slave traders, for example.
Right. Yeah. Those would be them.
And it also turns out that they aren't conditioned by white systems to be bad. So, for example, some slavery apologists would say, some Black slave trade apologists would say, well, okay, the economic demand was created by white people, and therefore the problem is all due to white people, and these Black people are just victims in a cog. Yes, they did some horrible things, but they were socially conditioned into this system. Well, turns out that no, this is Black slaves being sold to Black people. But also, even back then, they were going the other way into Arabia as well, at which point they would be castrated by brown people. and forced to be slaves in very demeaning conditions. So yeah, it turns out that the problem is much more complex than the Manichaean, the usual childish Manichaeanism that you see everywhere.
Okay, so next page, he's saying anti-racism is not simply being against racism. It is an active mission. And he says it requires being loud, uncomfortable, and confrontational, and visible to ensure change is made. And so he's asking, what does so he wants people's, to sort of, it's sort of like a workbook kind of thing. What does being anti-racist mean to you? Is it difficult? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we have to be loud, uncomfortable, confrontational, and visible to ensure that change is made.
Yeah. So we have to be loud. Presumably, we have to be loud, confrontational, and aggressive to people who, like us, who claim that racism is still a problem and would push back against it wherever we see it, but would also say that false allegations are really a thing, and that critical thinking is important in specific backing things up with evidence, like apparently he can't do. As suggested, if I was to try and back up the arguments that he was making, I could do a far better job than he has. But pointing that out, we should be bullied, basically. That's what I think he's saying here. So we should bully people.
Yes.
Yeah, we should bully genuine racists.
Loudly. Yeah.
We should bully genuine racists. Fair enough. That might not be the most productive way of changing their mind, but okay.
Right.
Well, you got that. What's his name? Daryl, famous jazz musician. Daryl.
Yeah.
Daryl. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah.
And he's got a whole wardrobe full of Ku Klux Klan robes. And he, by not being confrontational, by going there and making friends with them, manages to stop them being racist, which is productive. So going by the evidence, if being loud and confrontational works, then by all means, I mean, certainly if somebody hates somebody because of their skin color, then that's a reprehensible thing to believe. And then, yeah, by all means, if you think that
probably
works,
it will not change the way that they think, but it may make them go underground, or it might make them find other friends like themselves and cause more problems.
Right. And you never know, if you're an insecure 16-year-old white boy who is being bullied because they're a racist, even though they're not, and they've therefore lost their in-group, and they're desperately searching for one because all human beings need one. And suddenly they find a far right group who say, don't worry, it's not your fault. Yes, you were accused of all these baseless things and you weren't a racist, but here, black people really are evil and this is evidence of that. You might actually be, in fact, I would say it's highly likely that you're herding people into the open arms of the far right.
Yeah, actually, we should do there's an author that we actually cited in our research that would be good for us to read an article.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, again, I'm going to be charitable and just say that this bloke is a bit of an idiot, because this is very, very dangerous what he's arguing here, that we start to bully people based on nothing. And bully people even for following the evidence or even being intellectually curious by saying something like, does it follow from this anecdote that the whole of the justice system is racist? How dare you challenge that? I mean, you're either with me or you're against me. So by pointing out that this is crap from an intellectual point of view, presumably that makes me against him and makes me a racist.
Well, and I feel a little bit like, he's not taking himself seriously enough to do a little more research either, right? Like,
right. Maybe he's not an idiot. Maybe he's just lazy.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, maybe this is partly, it's like, well, this isn't going to last long, but I'm going to make hay while the sun shines kind of thing. And let's make this, I mean, it's an attractive presentation here. I mean, it's black and red. So I don't mean attractive, as in like, I mean, it's a bit jarring with the sort of graffiti-ish black and red, stuff in the book, in this little booklet. But, I mean, why put too much into it if you don't think this is going to last too long? It's like, we just got to make this work.
Let's just get it out. Get it out quickly. Exactly. Like, while the fashion is still hot, let's get it out.
So then he has the next page. So now we're on page 5. What does racism look like? So he's talking about the difference between overt, subtle, and systemic racism. So overt racism is, displays of over-the-top hatred for BIPOC. That's descriptive. Cartoonish ability to view BIPOC as subhuman. And then he says, see the George Floyd challenge. And that's in quotes. What's the George Floyd challenge? Do you know?
No.
I don't either.
Sorry for the keyboard sounds. I'm going to look this up.
I think it might be that, like, stay quiet for 9 minutes or something. I don't know. Anyway, very little interest in becoming better people. So that's what he calls overt racism. Very little interest in becoming better people.
Okay. So the George Floyd challenge was a TikTok thing in which white teenagers, it said, were reenacting his death.
Ew.
Mostly white males are seen smiling in the photos and kneeling down on their necks with their friends.
Ugh.
Yeah, images come as a heinous parody to the death of George Floyd, 46. Yeah, it's pretty disgusting.
Yeah, that is disgusting. That says cartoonish ability to view BIPOC as subhuman. I guess, I don't think that's cartoonish.
That's not cartoonish. That's pretty disgusting.
But it is disgusting, yes.
Yeah. Very little interest. Sorry,
what? Go ahead.
Displays of over-the-top hatred for BIPOC.
And then very little interest in becoming better people.
What does that mean?
I don't know, but I think that's beyond overt racism. That's just like,
do you know what I think that means? I think that he's counting overt something that would usually be counted as subtle. And what I think he means by this is that if you're somebody like us, he doesn't mean that, like, I don't think, again.
Yeah.
I don't think he means that the people who he's criticizing here don't want to become better people in some ways, like they don't want to work harder and earn more money or be nice to their spouses. What I think he's getting at is people who would deny systemic racism is a thing to the extent that he thinks it's a thing, and would refuse to accept his salvation as presented herein. That's what I think he's counting as overt racism. So for example, me saying he's full of shit,
right,
which he is,
or anybody who's in the training who
right. So in the training, I would
converted is now an overt racist.
Right. So for example, if we were in this training, and I think we can say we because we are brash enough to do this. If we were in this training, one of us would say, hold on, this, you're claiming white supremacy in healthcare. The link that you've supplied doesn't support your claim.
Right.
Which doesn't. Therefore, I think he would say, okay, so you're refusing to accept my evidence. Therefore, you're turning down. It's kind of crazy religious, isn't it?
An opportunity to become a better person. Yeah.
Why are you doing that? Well, presumably because you want to continue enjoying power over black people, even though we don't have any. I don't want any either.
Yeah.
No thanks.
I'm struggling to have power over myself. So
right. Yeah. I really don't want any of that. So that's what I think he means by that. But again, I don't know. I don't know. But I would guess.
It is sufficiently vague, I guess, to mean any number of things. So subtle racism, he says, using microaggressive comments such as, wow, you're so well-spoken and articulate. Because I've never said that to a white person before.
People say that to me all the time.
I know. It's like we certainly have. I was, it's like, I was so proud of my students for being, writing, whatever.
I would say that to a black person if they were well-spoken and articulate.
Exactly.
Because most people aren't.
I know. Sadly, most people aren't. So true. And it's getting worse.
I know. And it is getting worse, isn't it?
Yes. Individuals who claim to be woke, but turn on a dime when provoked by BIPOC. See Amy Cooper.
Okay, I can't remember this one. I recognize the name. What happened with Amy Cooper? Oh, that was the, oh, that was, do you remember the dog thing?
Oh, was that in the dog park?
The dog park thing.
Yeah.
And that guy, and then he was like, oh, this is racism, but I don't want to condemn her. And he was trying to rise above it. And then it turned out that he threatened to poison her dog.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So, like, it turns out that she actually, like, was quite...
Was she in a dog park, or was she in a park where he was trying to have a picnic with his family and dogs weren't supposed to be there?
No, he was bird watching, I think, and she was getting...
right. And the dog... Yeah,
And
okay.
the dog was getting in the way of his bird watching, and so he threatened to do something to the dog, and then she went a bit mental because he threatened to do something nasty
So it probably
to the
had
dog
nothing to do with his race. It probably had to do with her wanting to protect her doggie.
Probably. I mean, I don't know, but what I'm saying is, like, maybe it did, maybe it didn't, but I would certainly fall down on the side of caution here. You know, a quick clip of somebody put on YouTube is not evidence for racism. And so this, again, is yet another example of him
cherry picking, finding
cherry picking stuff that is not as black and white as he would like to present it.
That
and
may or may not represent.
And wouldn't support his view anyway, even if it was. So I mean, you know, okay, you know, even if in this one instance it was racist, then does that mean, what does it mean? Like, does it prove?
Well, these are, so apparently, so that would be representative of a whole class of people who claim to be woke but turn on a dime when provoked by...
But by the way, I think that lots of people who claim to be woke are racist.
I do too.
And racist against, or often racist in a weird way against black people.
I agree.
So,
I mean, it's a way to justify, to explain, to perpetuate racism. And there are many people who would agree with us.
Yeah, I mean,
we're not alone.
If I meet a black person and I think that person is full of shit, like I think this guy's full of shit, I'm going to tell him he or she is full of shit. Probably in a nice way, not necessarily in a nice way. It depends on the context.
Well, it depends, yeah.
But I certainly wouldn't police my language because they were black, because I'm afraid of being called racist. If a student is black, I'm not going to give them a higher grade because they're black, because that wouldn't be good for them, by the way, you know. I'm going to treat people equally. You know, that's...
Yeah.
But woke people won't, right? Woke people often will not do that. They go to mush. You know, when a black person says something ridiculous in a meeting, like, "Oh my god, that's so..." Here we go. That's so articulate. Thank you so much. So brave. Oh wow! Like you wouldn't do that if it was a white person. This
happens all the time.
Yeah,
all the time.
And it is racist. Yes, it is racist. Like,
recently I've gotten 2 messages just in the last, month or so, maybe, where it was an all campus email.
Yeah.
So to hundreds of people apologizing for misspelling someone's name. Now, my name is difficult to pronounce and to spell, and people often call me Liz, for example, and, so my last name is difficult to pronounce and spell. My first, people call me Liz. Yes, they call me all kinds of different things, and I'm often correcting them, mostly because I don't want it to catch on,
Okay,
because then pretty soon, like, somebody will call me and I won't answer because that's not my name, and then they'll be mad. So I'm like, no, I don't go by Liz. I go by Elizabeth, or I don't go by Beth, or whatever. But in all these years that I've been doing this, no one has ever sent an all-campus email apologizing for misspelling my name, which happens all the time, or for calling me something that I'm not called. However, just in the last month, so since school started, I've gotten 2 of those all-campus emails. So, so yeah.
I've got a funny story. I've got a funny story. So, in Japanese, there's kind of like an affix that goes on the end of your name afterwards. So if you're a boy, a casual. So if you, so if I wanted to address you formally, it would be spivak-san in a
Okay.
customer, or spivak-sama would be kind of like the really respectful. And then spivak-san would be the less kind of like more like Mr., Mrs., Miss.
Okay. And then there's a male version. So Burke something.
No, that's the same. So that's gender neutral, those
Oh,
two.
okay. Okay.
But when you get to the informal, there is a, I might call you, because it would always be shortened, so I might call you this Chang. Chan would be either used for females or for small children.
Okay.
So
So
for
it's
small
like
children,
an
it can be
endearment.
endearing.
Kind of.
And then the male version is kun, so it would be Mike kun. But sometimes, if it's super endearing, they'll use the female form.
Oh, okay. So like sweetie, sort of like honey.
Yeah,
you know.
so they call me Mike Chan instead of Mike Kun, which is
Okay.
super informal and completely inappropriate.
Okay.
In a Japanese way, not in a Western way. It's not like there's nothing sexy or anything about it. It's completely inappropriate from a Japanese point of view, because it's disrupting the kind of hierarchical, what is right and wrong instinctively to Japanese people. So you should never call your teacher Mike Kun, for example, and it's completely inappropriate. And you certainly shouldn't call your teacher Mike Chan.
Okay.
It's very cute to call them that, but you shouldn't do it. Guess what I'm often called by my Japanese female students?
Mike Chan.
Mike Chan. And do you know how I feel about that?
Grossly offended, and you demand an apology?
No. But here's the thing: they would never talk to a Japanese teacher like that. They would never talk. But is it racism? Don't know. Not in a kind of abusive sense. It's kind of affectionate. They're not misbehaving in my class. They're not being disrespectful to me in any other way. So how do I feel about being called Mike Chan? Fine. Call me whatever the fuck you like. I don't care.
Especially if you're going to actually show up to class and do your work. That would be
yeah. Great. As long as you're here giving me 70% in class, I don't want 100%, 70%. That's it. That's enough. Thank you very much. Call me whatever you like. So yeah. Okay.
People who try to ignore or deflect racial conversations by saying, why does everything have to be about race? Well, actually, I actually do say that sometimes. I raise my kids to be colorblind. So he's very offended by the colorblind.
Because he doesn't understand what it means.
Right.
Because colorblind does not mean that you do not see the color of someo's skin, unless you do.
Unless you're blind.
Right. Probably don't. But no, it means that you try your best not to take a person's skin color as an indication of their intellectual, physical, or moral worth.
Right.
Which is something I don't do, by the way.
Right.
Just saying.
Yeah. In fact, I have a much worse opinion of some of my white colleagues too. So.
No, I mean, and it goes back to that story I was telling you that like I am actually now racist against white people, because I know that white people are more likely to be critical social justice types.
Yeah.
Whereas black people are less likely to be so. And so I tend to avoid white people, and I have no problem. I don't make that judgment with black people.
And just taking advantage of, of this weird time to take advantage of, sort of, I don't know. Again, I hate to use the term that's used all the time now, but to signal their virtue, right?
Yeah.
And I'm okay. So those are then there's the systemic racism. Black students are half as likely to be placed in advanced placement courses than their white counterparts. Now, one issue, and we did talk about this with Will Reily, but I've talked about it with other people also. I think we talked about it with Brandy, and one of the issues is they're getting rid of advanced placement in so many schools. And part of it is because the vast majority of students are so far behind. Most kids are reading at a third grade level, even in the 10th grade. Now, if you have a school system that has, X amount of money, right? So they have $100. Okay. And so you have 100 kids and you have $100, and, you only have 3 that qualify for advanced placement. Are you, those 3 kids, are you going to spend, 10 of your $100 on those 3 kids? Because you got to hire somebody, you got to, make sure that you got to find a classroom, you get to, all this stuff for, get curriculum together. So I do know that that's an issue. And, the podcast that I did with Brandy, I mean, she would call that racist. She would call that racist, but not in the way that he's describing it. He's describing it as if Black children are not allowed in, when in fact, what's really happening to a large extent is that advanced placement programs are not available in many school systems now, and they're becoming less and less available. So it is true that in richer neighborhoods, but that's a class system.
That's what I was going to go on to say.
A class issue. It is not a race issue.
Well,
but generally speaking, largely advanced placement courses are starting to be curtailed, and in part it is racist because they're also not getting offered for Black students, right? And what happens is that the rich kids get an opportunity because their parents find a way to get them some different opportunity. So again, not there is a racism involved, but not the way he's talking about it, unfortunately.
No, and then he goes on to say it would take a median Black female worker 226 extra days into another year to earn what a median white worker would make. Okay, but white people are not the top of the pile. So again, if you're going to talk about income inequality, first of all, okay, even if, it was just white people and Black people in America and white people earn more, it wouldn't necessarily follow that it was because of race. Now, let's give the devil his due here. I think that the legacy of racism is one reason why more Black people tend to be working class than white people tend to be working class relative to their overall population. Of course, there are more white people because there are just more white people, but relative to the overall population, I think that there is some truth to that. And that is a problem, even though it's not racism today, that racism in the past has kind of caused that. So I have some sympathy with that. But in any case, white Americans are not the top of the income earnings in the United States of America. There are other groups, I think Nigerian Americans who are very Black.
And I was just going to say, like, most people, I mean, Will Reily made this point, when in our podcast, but, most white people particularly would not know the difference between, a Black American, and a Nigerian American, right? But I mean,
right.
These would both be, Black to a white person, and so how do we make the argument then that it's, a Black descendant of, America versus a Black descendant of Nigeria? I'm not sure how you make that.
And if the system is white supremacy, as he alleges quite boldly, then how do you explain the fact that Indian Americans earn, I think, nearly double what median white Americans, and beneath them Asian Americans?
Asians,
and Jewish Americans, though apparently they're white now and can be bullied.
Yeah, depending on who you.
Yeah. Now, if you're far left, you're expressing solidarity with the head of the Palestinian Authority, who recently gave a speech on television in which he said that Hitler wasn't actually anti-Semitic, and the reason that he had to kill the Jews was because they had got into Germany and taken control of all of the systems. But you can express solidarity with those people and be a good person on the left these days. So anyway,
okay.
Yes.
And then Blacks make up to 33% of America's prison populations, even though we only represent 13% of our nation's population. And we already you had already referenced that earlier.
Yeah, again, I have a very big problem with the way in which people are punished for certain drugs in America. Again, drugs that are now legal, like marijuana.
Well, and the whole 3 strikes you're out thing. Yeah. Yeah. Which the 3 strikes laws have been changed and everything, but
there's still people in prison for them, right?
Correct. Yeah. It's not like everybody got, it's like, yay, so, yeah. Again, we can refer you to some other references in terms of the statistics and stuff. And so it's bad. It's maybe not as bad, depends on how you parse the data. So
yeah, I mean, we'll link to the Reily podcast that we did, because he's going to be much better, because this is his thing. And he's written 2 books on this.
Right.
But if you like us, you can see us talking to him, and he'll run through the data on all of this.
Where do you see, then he wants to know on page 6, where do you see racism in your daily life? Keep in mind, this is not what you see on television or the media. This is what you see in your personal environment and in yourself. Write your answers below: overt, subtle, systemic.
Well, so let's do it.
Okay. Well, I was going to say this is we can do this, but so I wanted to reference something, in my own life. This just came, very salient right in the moment, because I was just writing something about it last week. So there's a racial justice task force report, which people can actually see. Maybe I can link to that too. People should take a look at that at my own university. And so I'll just give you an example of one ridiculously anti-academic, even though this is an academic pursuit, supposedly 441 pages, and hundreds of people worked on this thing. So they asked a question, a little survey question, which, by the way, I was the IRB chair, so I actually reviewed these questions and found nothing wrong with them. So kind of ironic. So they just asked people, if you see racism in your life, and I can't remember or in your work life. So it was at the university, and I can't remember the exact wording of the question, and I can't remember the exact numbers. So I'm just spitballing here, but it was a vast number of people said no. Okay. So like 86% said either no, they didn't see racism, or had,
I know where you're going,
or weren't sure.
I know where you're going with this.
I think I've complained about this before, so you've heard this, right? So they actually, the people who wrote up the results of those statistics, actually, they included the pie chart and the statistics and everything, and then they said, this is a clear example of racism because the people who responded didn't realize
that they were
how
racist.
Much racism yes. And so this page here on page 6,
please link this. Knowing, as anybody would if you'd gone into the fucking literature, that the implicit association test and this idea of unconscious racism is junk.
Here's the thing. These are academics. These are people who should know, but these were academics at my institution studying themselves. So these were supposed scientists who not only wrote the questions, which were, and then analyzed data as a scientist would, right? And interpreted it.
If you ever watched The Simpsons?
I don't, but I certainly hear about it from plenty of people who do. I've seen little clips.
Dr. Nick Fuentes, have you heard of him? He's like this quack. It's like a reoccurring theme in The Simpsons. It's like, don't get an operation with Dr. Nick. And Dr. Nick will come and go, hi, everybody, like this. He's like an absolute quack. And that's just like, hi, everybody. I'm an academic now. I mean, like, the level of fraudulence.
Right.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So it made me think of this. It's like, it's this, this confirmation bias, right? Like he didn't ask, do you see, right? And then yes or no, have you seen, yes or no? And then if you say yes, what does that mean to you, right? He said, where is it, right? So there is no option to not have an example, because it's where, where do you see it? There's like, so that's, so where do you see racism in yourself? So again, I don't know, I mean, I guess, what is this, like is this his version of let's make the white women cry? I don't know. You know, identify yourself as a racist and write it down.
Okay, no, but let's do the activity.
Okay.
Where do I see overt racism? I see
Okay, so
overt.
let me go back to
Yeah. So,
I mean, if we use do we want to use his descriptions? So, displays of over the top hatred for BIPOC. Have I seen that in my life? Because he's saying not on television or the media. This is what your personal involvement. I personally have not seen any displays of over the top hatred for BIPOC
in your life.
In my personal life. Okay.
I have seen it in very, 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 and not often. I've seen it once or twice in very, very, very working class English rural pubs where there are no black people, by the way. So you're talking like the agricultural labourer, kind of the rural poor. I have seen overt racism, people talking about black people in that way in those places. Yeah, that's where I've seen it. I've never seen it in working class, in a city pubs. Only in, and rarely, but only in really, really, really rural. I mean, some of the least consequential places in society. These people have no power. They're quite downtrodden. They work for next to no money, shoveling shit, literally. That's where I've seen it. That's the only place I've seen it.
What about like in our own lives, cartoonish ability to view BIPOC as subhuman? I also have not seen that in my real life.
Oh, well, I just did.
Yes, yeah. You just
the George
described.
Floyd challenge. I mean,
oh no, that's what I mean. Yeah, but he specifically said not on television or the media.
Oh,
he
okay.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
No, never.
And very little interest in becoming better people.
Again, we don't know what that means, but if it means what I think it means, what I suggested earlier, which is denying that you're a racist, then I guess that's pretty common.
Yeah. What about subtle in our own lives? Microaggressive comments such as, wow, you're so well-spoken and articulate. I'm sure that I probably see that a fair amount, which I wouldn't call microaggressive, but sort of, like just sort of, oh, where are you from? I mean, I don't call that a microaggression, but individuals who claim to be woke but turn on a dime when provoked by a BIPOC. I certainly know people who claim to be woke, who I don't think, are sincere, but I've never seen someone just sort of flip.
No.
Yeah. People who try to ignore or deflect racial conversations by saying, why does everything have to be about race? I raise my kids. Yeah.
I do that.
Yeah. And I've definitely heard it, especially like at the gym or something like that, just crosstalk, not necessarily to me, but in my presence. But
it's not because, it's because it's all so cringe. Like, one of my favorite television characters was Buffy from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, right? Who was a strong female woman. I had a huge crush on her as a teenager. And like, I thought she was amazing. She was powerful, fighting the undead and all of that kind of stuff. Wonderful, right? Wonderful character. I never had a problem with Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Lara Croft or Starbuck from Battlestar Galactica or any of these kind of strong female characters. But now, kind of like when you see strong female characters in television and movies, because it's all the same, it's all just a bit cringe.
Well,
No,
and I was going to say, I
race
certainly
swap.
hear
I don't
people talk
care.
about,
Yeah.
yeah, I certainly hear people talk about, recent movies and stuff where they've sort of forced it, where they
Yeah.
maybe not necessarily even race, but the gender. I think maybe Ariel
Yeah, the Little Mermaid.
is now, yeah,
Black.
maybe the Little Mermaid is now black.
And like from my perspective, I don't care.
I don't either. I don't either.
I
Yeah,
don't care whether she's black or not. But
yeah,
people do. And by
right.
the way, I think 10 years ago, far fewer people would have cared if Ariel was cast as black than do now, because you're
Yeah,
creating a backlash. You're creating a
right.
backlash, ironically, um, which is not helping black people. It might be helping black people in
Many,
far of them getting hired in Hollywood, but it's just,
maybe, I don't even know, 10 years ago, 15, maybe 15 years ago, there was a musical Cinderella made for TV. And
mhm.
I don't know if you've ever seen it, but Brandy plays Cinderella. So
Oh, I
Brandy
had
the
a crush on her
singer.
as well.
Yeah.
I had a huge
So,
crush on her.
okay. So Brandy the singer plays Cinderella. She was very big at the time. So I
I
don't know
remember.
how long ago was that? 20 years
1990s,
ago?
late
Okay.
90s,
Okay.
early 2000s, I guess.
Okay. So 20 years ago. And Whoopi Goldberg played the queen, and another famous actor played the king, and I can't remember who played the prince. But there, basically, the whole cast was just multiracial, I mean, it's just ethnicity didn't matter. It was just fun people who could sing and were good actors, and they were all well known. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I think now people would bitch about it. People would be like,
They
"Why is
would.
everything?"
Why are they running black?
Even
Yeah.
though it was beautiful. I mean, they picked her because she was a great singer and was, the person at the time. So I don't, yeah. So I guess I do hear that, and I certainly have been
But
guilty
this is, but
of
this,
saying
but
that.
this is being created by these
It's being,
people,
yeah,
and like when I see people race swapped in movies on television, I don't really care. But it bothers me that people have kind of been forced into caring about it. Um, neither does it bother me to have gay characters in things either.
right.
But I don't know, but
I
I
think
can
there's
see
going to
why
be a
people would care
new.
because of the backlash to it. Do you know what I mean?
I think I'm not making this up,
Uh
but
huh.
uh, I think there's going to be a Cinderella, but there can be no dwarves.
Yeah, there
I mean,
is.
I'm sorry, not
There,
Cinderella, Snow White. Snow
Snow White.
White.
Yeah, there
Snow White.
is. I think one
Yeah.
of them is a dwarf, and the
Okay.
rest of them are like magical people or something.
Okay.
And
Because
the
a dwarf.
Cinderella, yeah, the main actress Cinderella is also like they're changing the story because she don't need no man. It's not having the prince save me or all that kind of stuff.
Oh, so
Like
Snow White won't be kissed by the prince at the end to wake her
no,
up.
no,
Oh.
no, no, because
Oh,
because
okay.
we've got from the point of reasonable, which would be that this notion of being a traditional female can be oppressive, which I agree it can be, if that's what you are socially conditioned and pressured into being.
Right.
And that
Can also,
exists, but it can
yeah,
also be completely fine. If
can be
you
your choice
right,
to,
if you
yeah,
want to be the princess kissed by the prince,
yeah,
that's fine.
yeah,
Knock yourself out. There's nothing inherently evil about that. And this is
right.
the thing that they don't get because they're not thinking things through. Like, I don't think there's any proponent of queer theory who would argue that there is anything inherently evil with somebody believing in what we would describe as a traditional female role and fantasizing about being in that character, or equally the masculine role and fantasizing about being in that character either. It's when it becomes, and they have a point, when it becomes a kind of a normative force, right? When they would kind of cite kind of Foucault's notion of biopower, that the more you diverge from the perceived norm, the more you're treated as a weirdo and outcast, and there's something to be said for that, and that's bad. And so if you're going to push back against that, great, but pushing back against that doesn't mean that the role is in and of itself inherently evil, and it's a misreading of the philosophy to argue that it is. But these people don't read philosophy.
No.
especially not their own.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's no need to change these stories, I don't think, necessarily. Write new ones. So, you know, if you've got Cinderella who is in a position where
Right.
she's being kissed by the prince and the rest of it, keep that, because that's a
Right.
valuable story that is popular and it's liked by lots of people, and that shows that those roles resonate with people. And if you want to push back and say, well, okay, maybe it resonates too much and maybe there aren't alternative things, well, write them. Write Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Right. Why
Make the Tomb Raider video games.
why make Lord of the Rings
Oh God, yeah.
what t- you know, write again, like you said, write something new. Why destroy the
Well, I
Lord
mean,
of the Rings?
you know, even within Lord of the Rings, okay, so if you wanted to do something about racial injustice within Lord of the Rings, then you can take the black tribes that were the servants of Sauron in the books. How did they become that way?
Right.
And it turns out, if you go to the lore that was written by Tolkien, it was because they were absolutely screwed over and oppressed and brutalized, right?
So
within the lore that Tolkien read, I mean, you'd have to flesh it out because there weren't so many stories,
yeah.
but it was there within Tolkien's lore. The reason that they had become servants of Sauron was because they had been absolutely screwed over. So if you wanted to do something on social justice in the Lord of the Rings mythos that already existed, you could have absolutely done that. You could have absolutely have done that, and it would have been great. But no. You had to go and start making elves black. And again, if you want to have black elves, fine. But let's make something that's not Lord of the Rings. I mean, you know,
yeah.
I mean, it's just cringe. It's just cringe. Okay.
Okay, so systemic racism. So again, this is not in the media. This is in our own lives. This is, you know, sort of like, so people not being given opportunities, basically,
and they can't be
because
white,
of their.
because we can give you plenty of examples of people not being given opportunities because they're white.
Right.
Like
this is only
somebody who appeared on our podcast who got turned down for a job, even though in America, even though his potential boss was in favor of him, and his boss was overruled by the HR department, who said, no, you have to do a diversity hire. Even though this person actually comes from a very impoverished working class background, and is really wildly bright and a really decent human being, he was turned down on the basis of him being white and a male. So there you go. Yeah. But that doesn't count.
But that's doesn't
not
count.
Racism, apparently.
So again, you know, I can't say that, you know, that I have a specific example. I certainly have examples, again, of the opposite. So I don't know. Or an example of somebody working, like, sort of working extra hard, you know, or having to, in order to, you know, again, I see it much more in class, you know, as in class systems, you know, like socioeconomic class.
Do you know what? I will go a whole week quite easily, because where my classes are situated, I will go a whole week without seeing another white person in the flesh, without talking to a white person. Last week, I don't think I saw a white person in a restaurant. I didn't talk to them. I guess so. Last week I did talk to white people online. I talked to you and Jen, and I talked to James. But in my actual day-to-day life, I don't see white people. I don't interact with them. Do I form negative impressions of Japanese people? No. I feel more cultural affinity with Japanese people than I do with English people, because I know that they're not going to be, not because I think that I'm culturally closer to them in terms of my own culture, but because I'm not afraid of them in the same way that I am afraid of people making up stuff about me who are woke. Black people, I'm not afraid of them either. They tend not to be congruent with this ideology in my experience.
So I'm not sure that the way that systemic racism, sort of is defined and described here, that we can give examples in our own personal lives, right? Like, I don't know of any, like a Black student maybe who's been denied, a grant, or, certainly entrance into a class, or something like that.
Quite the opposite, if anything, right?
Well, I have heard from a few of my students in the last few years, that they didn't agree with some of the wokeism, and that they felt that they couldn't speak out, or that they couldn't, say, resign from something that they had gotten chosen because they know they were chosen because they were Black. So they were chosen to participate in some student group, especially invited, because they were representative of the BIPOC community, and that
which doesn't exist, obviously,
right.
But
And so they were invited. So the university had their demographic information, and was able to send out an email inviting them specifically, would you like to apply for this or participate in this? And then I've had students say, then they say things in some of these meetings that I don't agree with, and I don't feel as though I can
articulate that.
Yeah.
So
that it would feel, in fact, one girl told me, that a friend told her that it wasn't Black, she wasn't being Black enough. So it's like, from then on, she kept her mouth shut. So this was several years ago. So I can only imagine that maybe it would be a little bit even worse now. I don't know. But other than, again, that's hearsay, right? That's just somebody telling me a story.
Well, going by the evidential standards of this pamphlet,
that would be enough. Yeah.
That would be enough, right?
Do we see racism in ourselves? That's the other question.
Again, as it's defined here, no.
Mm-hmm.
Like I, as I said, I tend to avoid white people. Do I see it in myself? Do I see myself disliking Black people, or would I evaluate a Black person negatively as a consequence of their skin? The only slight thing I would do with Black people, in terms of make a kind of guess, a correlation guess, would be just to say that in my experience, and the empirical evidence backs this up, they're less likely to be woke than white people are.
Right. I worked for an HBCU, a historically Black college or university, and I do remember, of course, so I was like the only white administrator. So I was, there was a white female secretary, and there were a few white professors and stuff, but certainly I was in the minority, and we got a big grant, but before we got the grant, they were talking about applying for special pools of money for HBCUs and stuff. And I was encouraging them to apply for other things and stuff. And I said, we got to get better at being something besides being Black.
Right.
And, it was like, I think people were shocked when I said it, but at the same time, nobody said, oh, what a racist thing to say. It was like, oh yeah, like maybe we should expand the places that we apply to. Maybe we were thinking too narrowly. And I certainly saw examples. I remember one time I was riding in the car. I think maybe I was driving, and my coworker and I were together, and he put his sunglasses on the dashboard of the car, and we turned a corner, and the sunglasses flew out the window. So we pulled over, and he's outside of the car looking for his sunglasses. And we weren't there 30 seconds, and a police officer came by. It's really? Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And at the time, I thought, oh, that's, geez, that's like speaking of cringeworthy. It's like, oh, is that racism? And then a few years later, I was interviewing for a job, and I pulled over by the side of the road. I realized I had forgotten my suit. So my suit was hanging at home, and I was halfway to a job, like I was spending the night, before the interview. So I was halfway to the hotel, 3 hours away, and I'd left my suit at home. So I pull over and call my parents, okay, and say, do you think you could like meet me part way so I don't have to drive the whole, hour and a half back? Could you meet? So I pull over. 30 seconds later, a police officer comes up and it's like, what's going on? Why are you pulled over and stuff? So it's like, that incident with the sunglasses, I was like, oh, well, maybe that was just happenstance. You immediately go to the racism thing. And so could I say that that's maybe a subtle racist thing, the incident with the sunglasses? Yes. But then when I think about a couple of other times when, I've been, sitting by the side of the road, it actually happened at Bridgewater campus not that long ago, either pulled over to take a phone call right on campus. Bam, police officers like, do you have car trouble? What's going on? It's like, no, just didn't want to take a phone call while I was driving, So we can attribute things inappropriately.
Yeah. I mean, certainly in Japan, you will sometimes see police officers who are just checking every single foreigner. Like, they'll pull over every single foreigner.
Well, maybe he was just being nice, like thinking that we were having car trouble.
That has happened to me.
Any one of those three things would think it could have been police officer just doing what they do, which is driving around, right? Sees a car by the side of the road with the blinkers on and said, like, do we need help?
The other thing is Japan is so ethnically homogenous. If I'm in a train in central Tokyo, there's, through the center of Tokyo, there probably won't be any white people in the train with me.
When you said you're huge, like you're actually an imposing figure somewhat.
Yeah. So I actually, when I was in America, I thought I was tiny. And I looked at the average height in America, and I found that actually
you're
British
very
people
average.
I'm slightly above average. And I found that British people on average are actually taller than Americans, which was something that completely blew my mind away. So I don't know. I think it must be that my mind is calibrated to Tokyo, where I'm enormous compared to most people. There are Japanese people, of course, who are taller than me.
Sure.
Very few of them. So, I'm physically imposing in Japan. So that might be another reason. But also one reason I found with police stopping me has just been to practice their English. Like they've been taking English lessons and like, oh, excuse me. Oh, where are you from? Oh, I would like to visit there. Oh, and where are you from? Another microaggression. Oh, I would like to visit there. Oh, I like English tea. Okay, and then that they just want to practice their English. Bit annoying, but okay.
Yeah. Well, I've referred people, and I'm sure that I'm sure that people interpreted this as racist, but people who I know speak multiple languages or or bilingual or multilingual and say, oh, well, it turns out I have a student who also is and because people like to talk to someone in that language and they don't get the opportunity unless they travel, right? And so I suggested to a student and a professor that it's like, oh, you should meet so-and-so because you both speak such and such. And I'm sure that it was considered racist, but I honestly thought that I was doing them a favor because I thought that they would like to actually speak in the other language and practice and
and why not?
Yeah.
I mean,
my friend who speaks multiple languages is always looking for opportunities to, he'll go to be an interpreter at a fair or something just to practice.
I mean, here's what would be considered a racist microaggression that I've been subjected to, which is really annoying. I'll ask somebody something in Japanese like, excuse me, does this train go to somewhere? So like, sumimasen, kono densha wa nani something ikimasu ka, which means, is it going to somewhere? And then they'll answer me in broken English that I just can't understand.
Your Japanese is so bad that I'm going to answer you in English.
Well, no, my Japanese is fine. Like something like in Japan. Yeah. So in Japan, there's like, or another one. Here's another one. I'll go to a supermarket and I'll ask for something. sumimasen, Kankoku no nori yarimasu ka? Which is, do you have like Korean seaweed, which is like amazing. That's a snack.
Yes.
I don't know if you get it in America, if it's a thing yet.
I have had it, and it is
Yeah,
really good.
it's really good. And it's really low in calorie as well, and high in iodine, so it's great. And then I'll just get, especially with young girls. Is he talking Japanese? Or are these just kind of weird sounds as if like a dog had just spoken to them? And then, and then she'll go off and get the manager.
Oh my God! Even though she perfectly understood your question.
Well, no, she just can't process it, right?
Yeah.
So I've had that. The other day, like I was sat in the lobby of my wife's parents have an apartment in quite a posh apartment in a seaside resort in Japan, which we're very lucky that we can use. And I was in the lobby waiting, and some Japanese person walked past me and said, "Hello," in English. So I said hello back in English.
Yes.
I could have said konnichiwa if I wanted to, but I thought maybe he wants to practice English. Like if a Japanese person speaks to me in English, I'll respond in English because I know they generally want to speak English, right? And whatever, fair enough. Happy to. So I said, "Hello, how are you?" And he just nodded and didn't answer and walked on. Then he walked through the doorways and he was like, "Oh, there's a foreigner there. Oh, maybe he's a robber." And then he was talking to his friend, and his friend like, so desu. Like, what the fuck? Are you that stupid that you think I can't understand you?
That can only happen to Black people, Mike.
Here's another one. Here's another one. This one is really, really, really funny. 3 girls, about 20, 21 years old, stood actually nearby me. One of them just looks up at me. 外国人怖いよね. And the next one's like, which means foreign people are scary, aren't they? And then the next one was like, 怖い, which is scary. そうですよね. And then they went back. でも韓国人はあまり怖くない. Korean people aren't that scary. そうでもね. だから韓国人は日本人似てるだからね. Like that's because they're similar to Japanese. So they're all of this right in front of me. And I'm like,
Did you ever reply?
No, I didn't. Like, but there was another woman who was like slightly older, and I was laughing, and she could obviously twig that I could understand what they were saying. We just looked at each other and laughed, and she was Japanese. And that was that. I mean, and again, so what?
Microaggressions.
But here's another one I got. The final one. Could go on forever. 2 girls stood in front of me. One of them looks at me. 外国人はかっこいいですよね. Talking to her friend, like foreign guys are so good looking.
Oh, so first you're scary and now you're good.
結婚したいね. I really want to marry one. So, again, which would be exoticization in woke speak, whatever. So
Objectification.
Objectification. So have I been subjected to these things? Yeah, because I'm a BIPOC, right?
Yeah.
Definitionally, I would be. Probably not. I mean, they just don't like white people, so they wouldn't give it to me. But according to their logic, I should be living as I do in a society that is far more homogenous than the United States is, by the way. Far more homogenous and monocultural too. So yeah, I mean, I've been subjected to all of these things, but I don't know. Whatever. Is it a big deal? No.
Yeah. You seem to be coping okay.
I seem to be coping just fine.
On page 7, objections to the mission. So he basically, is giving people and some tools, I guess, to deal with the people like us who aren't getting on board or aren't fighting. On the right side. It's not going to be smooth sailing. We strive to be anti-racist in our own lives and communities. We will encounter a lot of people, including loved ones, who will try to derail us. And here's some quick tips. So you pull them aside because nobody likes to be called a racist publicly. Wow. That's really, I mean, yeah, maybe I should send this to my university community. Nobody likes to...
Can you imagine those girls going, "Kwai, kwai, 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 kwai," and I pull them aside, "Sumimasen! Sore wa sabetsu desu!" Like, excuse me, that's racist. Can you imagine what? Would that be productive? Then they really would be scared, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously, a lot of these cancel culture is basically all about, calling people racist publicly, right?
Right.
Avoid use statements. This is, sort of like, oh, that statement made me feel this is what they tell you how to, deal with your spouse and everything too. It's like, you don't say, you never do the dishes. You say, I feel blah, blah, blah when you don't participate in the dishes or whatever. Play dumb. I don't understand. What did you mean when you said such and such? And he gives the examples. Did you see this? I don't understand what you mean when you said the rioters are like savages. So yeah.
What are you supposed to say? What are rioters like? Rioters, no, they're perfectly law-abiding citizens.
Right. Sometimes playing dumb. Now, I have used this, and my friend advised me. This is many, I don't know, when I was in grad school. He's like, sometimes you just shine it on, and I'm like, what? And I have learned to just sometimes kind of shine it on, just sort of play dumb, and so yeah. I mean, I do think that's a workable plan on racism or a lot of things. Find common ground. So, once you arrive at some point, now this is though something that you warn people against all the time though, right? It's like, can we agree that there's racism? Yes. Well then, right. This sort of,
yeah, I mean, this is the kind of trick, right? So, and this is how they hooker people in with their ideology, because you are against racism. You are appalled by people dehumanizing other people, and you're absolutely right to be. It's a horrible, horrible, horrible thing. And the fact that it is historically more prevalent than it is now is besides the point. It's a horrible,
it doesn't
horrible
make it any better.
No. So they get you in by that. They say, look, we're fighting racism and we're fighting people like the KKK, and they are. They don't like the KKK and those kind of people. But then once you're in, they say, yeah, but racism has evolved. This is the language from this article, right? The racism has evolved. And it's no longer just the KKK. It's within all of these institutions. And our evidence is statistics that confuse correlation with causation, or just anecdotes, which is this. And now your identity is invested. You have to go along with this. Otherwise, this new in-group that you've just formed, full of people that you like and you think is on a good cause, will start calling you a racist. Which is, that's what happens. So it's it's a pretty shitty thing to do. So, yeah, I mean, can you find common ground? Yeah, but, don't get sucked in.
And then, we'll skip the next one and then go, be willing to love them from a distance. And, this is sort of the way that I'm coping, and sort of like, what, if you're unwilling to really talk, then you just have to let it go. Right. I mean, I don't love these people from a distance, but at some point, maybe you just have to not, you do what you do your best, and you do it,
See, I'm really, really, really lucky compared to you, because I can just vanish into Japan. I can just vanish into a bar where this culture doesn't exist, or a beautiful temple where I can have conversations with people, I can meet people, I can have friends.
But in America, it's pretty hard, and especially New England. Yeah, it's pretty hard to escape it. Yeah, and at a university. And then he does link. He says use data, and he links to data. And I did click on that, and it is, it's a very boiled down. If you click on it, you'll see that it's again, all the nuance is taken out of it. It's just, but there is data there. And, it's sort of like a how to lie with statistics kind of data, but it's there. It's in its, most simple form. And he uses that, a couple of times. Don't engage with anger. So if people,
hang on a second, but he called this as a fight book and says you have to be confrontational and loud, and now you're not supposed to engage with anger.
Yeah,
it's just
the success rate, and I believe the success rate of changing the mind of someone on social media by being argumentative
fine. I mean, but your whole thing has been about engaging with anger.
I know, being loud and
confrontational and aggressive, and this is necessary. And now you're saying don't do it.
Yeah.
What?
Well,
like,
get the
hold either position, which is fine, but they're so contradictory. And yes, I get it. Cognitive dissonance is the norm and the rest of it, but not usually in an article. Well, I mean, then again, with your university, like 85% of people said they're not racist, therefore racism is.
Yeah. Or that they hadn't witnessed it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Or hadn't experienced it or witnessed it. Focus on the truth. Going back and forth with loved ones or strangers, and especially on social media, is a draining exercise. So stand loudly and proudly as you can. Not everyone will agree with you, and that's okay. Just don't be quiet. Being quiet's not an option. But on the other hand, don't engage with anger. And then block. You don't have to engage with people who are being disrespectful and antagonistic. There is a block button for a reason. So that he's talking about social media. You can't really do that in,
I don't block anybody.
Yeah.
I don't even know. In fact, I only blocked one person. I was having a debate with them on Twitter, and they were coming out with the worst arguments. And I was like, obviously you're not very bright. Maybe this isn't the thing for you. Yes, I've got a learning disability. I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. How do I defend you now? You're being ableist by saying that I'm stupid and I'm coming up with stupid arguments. It's like, how do I respond to that? Right? Okay, block. I'm sorry, I can't engage with this. Block. That is literally the only time I block somebody.
So then he asks, who in your life has racist beliefs? And then then we're coming to the end here, where he's listing, or he's just sort of, we're going to get a hit from all angles with questions and comments from people as you travel the path of anti-racism. Just use these pages as helpful resources. So, he's just, he gives examples. So all lives matter, he says, is racist. What about black on black crime? He says is racist. Blue lives matter, he says, is not a thing, because being a police officer is a chosen profession, not something you're born into. So therefore you can't do their lives. Your life doesn't matter if you've chosen something.
If you've chosen it, right?
Yeah. So. Here's an idea: don't break the law, and then you won't have any problems with the cops. So he says that's
Chris
racist.
Rock used to say that. Chris Rock did a whole sketch on that in the 1990s. So Chris Rock is now a white supremacist, evidently.
Yeah. I'm colorblind. Again, he doesn't like that. Rioting doesn't solve any problems, and
does not solve problems.
So he's going to argue against that. I think the term Karen is often is as offensive as the N word. And I do agree with him that the term Karen is not as offensive as the N word. But why can Black people say the N word and I can't? And he has a little thing for that. You don't see white people rioting when one of us gets killed.
Yeah, you do. Sorry, but you do.
Yeah.
I know quite a few of them, actually. Do you not see the mobs?
Yeah. Rioting and looting isn't protesting, and then George Floyd isn't a hero.
Hold on a second. Sorry, I misunderstood that. You don't see white people rioting. Sorry, we see white people rioting when Black people get killed. We don't see white people rioting when white people get killed. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares.
But white people do participate in
In mobbings and
Plenty.
rioting,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But not generally in defense of white people.
Not generally, but I can't come up with an example, but I surely think that there have been times when maybe not rioting, but protesting.
Protesting, but when have you seen? But I mean, the point stands. So one of the arguments that really is behind this whole critical social justice thing is that white people are forming an in-group with white people and then using it to discriminate against black people. And I think that the reason you don't see white people rioting is because white people generally don't form in groups based on ethnicity. I mean, do you? Would you empathize more with a black colleague than a white colleague? Don't think so.
Yeah. No, me either.
I mean, some people might, like, again, on the fringes of society. Certainly, I mean, when I talked about, encountering overt anti-black racism in working class British pubs, they would they might form an in-group against black people in that kind of circumstance and identify as being white. But I mean, white people don't.
Well, we read that article, about, that where they primed white identity, right? And they the authors did find some evidence in some of the studies that that people, especially with regard to this woke stuff, that when they were reminded that whiteness was bad, then people seemed to be like, oh yeah, whiteness is bad. So, I don't believe in white privilege. And he says, I did not click on this link. Here's a helpful article on the subject. I did not click on that, so I don't know what
is white privilege. Okay.
Is it a white person that wrote it?
Don't click on it. Don't click on it. Don't click on it. Right? Okay. So this is going to be fun. So I clicked on the article. 2 academics weigh in, and right at the top of the article, when I clicked on it, it's now moved, but there was an image of 2 academics. One was a white female and one was a black male. Can you guess who the 2 academics were? One white female, one black. Who do you think it was?
Well, so the writer of oh shoot, what's the book that I was just referencing? The book about making white women cry, the white fragility one.
Correct, Robin DiAngelo. That was the first one.
Robin DiAngelo.
Robin DiAngelo. So yes. I clicked on it right away, and now they're on like a panel together, and they're talking about it. Right?
Is it Ibram X Kendi?
Yes.
Yes.
2 academics weigh in on white privilege. Yeah. So we got to listen to the 2 dumbest. So there's evidence. And by the way, actual critical race scholars, the sophisticated lot, like a lot of them will call these 2 absolute dum-dums.
Oh, yeah. Hacks. Yeah.
Absolute dum-dums. And so his standard of evidence is to pick, again, and we do have to unpack their arguments and their ideas because as dummy as they are like very consequential and more consequential than the sophisticated arguments, right? But in his book, he has referenced 2 authors for whom the sophisticated critical race theory scholars would call outright dum-dums and say completely misrepresent their movement because they're so dummy. So that's his standard, right? The anecdote of 2 absolute dummies. Deary me. A helpful article on the subject.
Yeah, that's so helpful. Dr. King, Dr. King says blah blah blah. So anything that Dr. King says is, not to be. It's
no. So what they're going to say? I think what they're going to say. Let me have a look through this.
It's interesting that you're choosing.
So look again. He's such a dummy, right? He's not doing like. I read more woke stuff than he does, so I can actually do a better job of outwoking him. This is the weird position I find myself in, right? Where I can actually outwoke these people, like, easily. So what you would do, if you are coming up against somebody who is, I'm going to go woke here, right? So somebody would say, look, Martin Luther King said, I had a dream that one day my children will be judged by the content of their character as opposed to the color of their skin. I'm probably anglicizing that a bit, but that's the basic message, right, from his famous speech.
Mm-hmm.
And that went around the world and resonated with people, and that's one of the things that convinced people to be anti-racist. I think to be anti-racist in the traditional sense that we are, right? To be against racism, to judge people, to be colorblind, because that is clear, cool to be colorblind. And again, he's not saying don't see the color of their skin. He's saying don't judge them by the color of their skin.
Right.
That's what he means, right? And I completely agree. However, if you want to counteract that from a woke scholar point of view, from a critical race theory scholar point of view, you could also argue that Martin Luther King said some stuff that would be very commensurate with today's wokery. Would say stuff about America being a deeply ingrained racist society, and white people in general having this debt towards black people that needs to be paid, and all of these things. And they're right, he did write those things. But he's not doing that. He's not going down the scholarly road, which would be to say, actually, yes, Martin Luther King did say this, and this is the kind of world that we want to get to. However, we're not there yet, and so we need all of this identitarian stuff that he also wrote. But he doesn't do that because he hasn't read him. Doesn't do it. I mean, this is dumb stuff.
He says, oh, by the way, he was killed by a white person.
Yeah.
So therefore, anything he said should not be because he was killed by a white person.
But he can't even cite the body of work from Martin Luther King because he hasn't read it. I mean, what a dum-dum. Anyway, what's the next one?
A black celebrity says racism isn't real. So why should I believe you?
Which
it doesn't just random. He just says that's an example.
He didn't say it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never heard a black celebrity say that racism isn't real.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Okay. And so now, he just says, he talks about racism in the workplace here. 58% of black employees endured racism at work. Either really did say that they did, or just, who knows? Maybe the researcher just said, oh, they didn't say that they did, but we're sure that they did.
Well, okay, hold on. Let's be fair. He does offer a link, so he's not cited it properly.
Oh, yes. Being black in corporate
America.
Intersectional exploration.
Okay, so it's kind of loaded already with kind of intersectionality. And I click on the link, and file or directory not there. So the link is dead. And again,
okay.
It's not his responsibility to maintain the link.
No.
Being black in corporate America. Here we go. I think I found it. It's a PDF. Sponsors. Dahana, have you heard of them? Interpublic Group, Johnson & Johnson, KPMG, Morgan Stanley, Pfizer, Unilever, and the Walt Disney Company.
Okay. They all participated, or those are people who funded?
They funded it.
Okay.
Yeah. If this is the report, I mean, it's possible that there might be another report. It finds that black professionals are more likely than white professionals to be ambitious.
Ooh, that's bad. Horrible.
Nearly 1 in 5 feel someone of their race ethnicity would never achieve a top job at their companies. Well, possibly. Black professionals see barriers to advancement that are largely invisible to white professionals, which means that they must be real if they see them. Few have access to senior black leaders.
Well, if there's fewer people in that, in
the overall population.
Yeah.
They are more likely than any other group to encounter racial prejudice at work. So black people say that 58% of them feel that they are more likely to, and I bet you that's gone up over recent years if you look at Coleman Hughes' data on that.
All you got to do is tell people that there's racism, and
they'll believe it. Yeah,
they'll find it. Yeah.
Latinx 41% and Asian 38%, and experience certain microaggressions. Well, who cares about that?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that this is a fantastic piece of scholarship. But but this is the best evidence he's provided so far, and it's not great.
So it's not so much an academic as a like a consulting.
Yes. Formerly CTI, Coqual. I can't find the authors. Maybe they're at the bottom. Project team. Dr. Ella Bell Smith, Professor, Tuck School of Business, Dartmouth.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's Ivy League, so it must be good.
Yeah. So I might actually look it up later, but I was kind of interested. So in our own field in psychology, they were doing what they call an audit. Okay, so this is a big term right now, an audit. So it's just sort of asking people, these sort of vague questions about sort of like what's here, where do you see racism and that kind of stuff. And so here, American Psychological Association does an audit. Okay. And they put out a report, and it's beautiful in terms of the attractiveness, right, of it and everything. And I'm looking and looking and looking and they say, they said they asked 7 questions. Okay. So it wasn't 700 questions, 7 questions. Now, it is standard practice in something like this that you would publish the questions. I cannot find those questions anywhere, but they did summarize the results, which were to indicate that there was just racism rampant in the field of psychology. So I'm scanning
this. I'm scanning this.
A lot of times at the very end in an appendix.
I cannot find it.
Yeah.
There's a methodology section is like this long. Methodology section is like this long, literally on an A4 page, like not even a third of a page. No, about just under a third of a page is methodology. It's literally 1, 2, 3 paragraphs. The research consists of a survey, in-person focus groups, and insights, in-depth, capital I, capital D, registration mark sessions, parentheses, a proprietary web-based tool used to conduct voice-facilitated virtual group focus groups with over 150 participants, a qualitative questionnaire with responses from nearly 200 participants, and one-on-one interviews with more than 40 people. The national survey was conducted online and over the phone in June 2019 among 3,736. They're not giving, this is not a methodology section.
It's just a description of the participants.
Yeah, well, and it kind of looks like we kind of made it up as we go along, kind of.
Yeah.
That's the impression.
Yeah, we did a bunch of stuff. We didn't get enough people by doing it this way, so we did this other thing too. Yeah.
It was mixed methods.
Yes, mixed methods. Yeah, that's always
the go-to term, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there is no appendix.
Okay. So the actual instruments, whether that's the interview instruments or anything, doesn't say like available upon request or anything.
No. Throughout this research, this takes up a sentence. Throughout this research, Latinx refers to those who identify as being of Latino or Hispanic descent.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification.
Thanks.
Super helpful.
Oh dear, like how much money they got paid for this. Disney, Unilever, Pfizer, Morgan Stanley, KPMG, Johnson & Johnson, bloody hell. I mean, but of course, white supremacy is so bad, and the top of these corporations are doing whatever they can to stop this message from getting out.
It sounds like it sounds very similar to the quality of our racial justice task force report, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, and maybe it's rigorous and amazing.
Yes.
But not very likely if they didn't put the instruments down.
Right.
Or
again, say, supplementary material available at, or whatever.
Whatever.
You should be. Yeah. Okay, so BIPOC are subjected to less pay, kind of interesting wording, compared to their white counterparts, and are victimized by racial microaggressions. So, and he has some examples here. It's a white guy in a suit, that he's got sort of these thought bubble or these bubbles, kind of cartoon, if the people around here spent less time playing the victim, this would be a much better place to work. I feel like have a target on my back because I'm a heterosexual male. Everything in this company caters to everyone else except for people like me. You went to Stanford, nice. So what sport did you play? Listen, I'm here to hit my goals.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with what sport did you play? I mean, my answer would be very little. I just got drunk the whole time, but
exactly.
It's a kind of sport.
Listen, I'm here to hit my goals, not be a social justice warrior. So some of this stuff, I guess he says these are horrible. And he says they're actual quotes I've heard from corporate leaders. He says
they're fine.
So.
They're fine. Listen, I'm here to hit my goals, not be a social. Okay. Well, go ahead. If the people around here spent less time playing the victim, this would be a much better place to work. And I agree with that too.
I've said that about my own place to work.
Playing the victim being not actual victims, because I'm presuming the person who came out with that quote, if he didn't just make it up.
Right.
But if somebody was to actually say that, playing the victim is an actual problem. We did an article on this called Virtuous Victimhood. I think that was vaguely the name of it, in which we talk about people who pretend to be victims in order to divert resources to themselves away from actual victims. So, you should be against people playing the victim if you care about victims, because resources are finite, and they need to go to people who need them. So if you care about victims, you should be against people who are playing the victims. So all places are better with people without people playing the victims. That's if you're only thinking about the victims, by the way, not to mention the fact that people are wrongly accused of being perpetrators of racism or homophobia, both in my case, transphobia, recently climate change denial.
That's new. Okay.
I don't know where they got that one from. I've done content classes on like climate change as like a topic before, and I've never denied it was a thing. It's a climate change denier, you.
Yeah.
Anyway,
just add that. Just add that to the list.
That to my CV.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a target on my back for being white heterosexual male. Well, I've been denounced as being a cis white male. One of the things that was told about me was that I am the epitome of a cis white male. Period. Full stop. That is in and of itself. He is the epitome of a cis white male. Is in and of itself, all you need to know about me in a negative thing that you don't need, for example, It
was in an email that my students and I are the social work department is uniquely qualified to identify us as exemplars of white supremacy culture. So similar kind of thing, right?
And probably by the same evidentiary standards as this kind of guy is capable, right?
Probably,
anecdotes and dubious statistics.
Well,
not knowing the difference between causation and correlation.
Of hoopla, basically. A couple of tweets. So you can tackle these things. Some of these things may seem like common sense. So. And he says, to essentially confront people, right? Black people aren't given enough credit for their intelligence, and you're playing into a racist stereotype by asking me what sport I played. I don't think that many people. Honestly, if I was blind, I'd think you were a white guy. That is a pretty nasty. I don't know who would say that. I'm shocked by how well you managed that project. I mean, certainly, that was really challenging or something. I'm shocked. I don't know. That is kind of odd. So, my mother and I were just talking. I was visiting my parents, and my mother was telling me a story about this woman who said, "Oh, Carolyn, I love that outfit every time you wear it." So this was a white woman sort of, it's like, what, I know that I'm sure that she didn't mean, like you wear that outfit too often or anything like that, but these are the kinds of things. Sometimes people say stuff, the words. I listened to a podcast sometimes called Away with Words.
Uh-huh.
And so that just, people call in and ask like, well, where did this phrase come, or what does this word mean or something? One of the things that they always focus on is that words do not stand alone, that their meaning is, in the context of lots of other things, right?
Sure.
The words around it, but also like your physical context and your relationship with that person and on and on and on. Just like you were talking about, like your students really shouldn't call you that as a teacher. They shouldn't really, and yet you get the context, and they're almost like, they wouldn't do it to another teacher. They do it to you. In part, they're sort of like practicing scoffing at the formalities a little bit and just kind of pushing the limits and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But so all words are meant to be meant to be considered in a larger context. So I don't, if somebody said, I'm shocked by how well you managed that project, it doesn't mean like,
it would depend upon the context.
Yeah,
entirely.
It would depend upon. Yeah.
So I mean, like for example, with my students, why do I not get bothered about being called Mike Chan? Well, one, because I don't care what they call me, so long as they're performing in class. But actually, the fact that they're viewing me affectionately and viewing me more as a peer than a teacher would be very, very difficult if it was in the American context, right? Because in the American context, you actually require a bit of authority over these unruly students, maybe. I don't know. You would know better than me. Yeah. In the Japanese context, students are extremely deferential to sensei.
They're already,
teacher. So it's very like, and that's not helpful for my classes. I really want to explore ideas. I want to be talking with them. And so I have to kind of work hard to lower my status a little bit otherwise they're just going to sit there like penguins, just like the whole time. So in the context within which I operate, it's immensely helpful.
Right.
So yeah.
As the only Black person in the office, I'm putting you in charge of our anti-racism project. Now, I do hear this a lot.
Totally agree with
like, I don't want to be, it's like, why am I always picked for blah, 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 well, clearly it's because you're the Black person, like we shouldn't have, for example, a diversity committee without the token whatever on the committee, and then the person gets worn out because they're getting constantly asked to be on every committee. I think that they would probably be offended if they didn't get asked also. I think that you're kind of in a catch-22 there. I agree. And at the same time, if you don't have diversity on the diversity committee, is that a problem? I don't know.
I don't know. I love Japan's response to this, though. I love it, and it's cringe, and it shows Japan really is a bit behind. But it made me laugh a lot. There was a intergovernmental summit on gender diversity in Australia, and I think it was Australia recently. It was like last year, and government bodies were supposed to send somebody to represent gender diversity. All of the countries, what gender do you think every country sent? Right, they all sent women, right?
Yes.
Apart from Japan sent a bloke. So you see this picture of them all posing in this government. Yeah. It's like, these different people. Some Japanese bloke there. It's just like, I love you, Japan.
Yeah.
I know it masks a bigger problem because gender equality is a serious issue in Japan. And the fact that they can't even send a woman to it is quite worrying. But just from all of that aside, just from a troll's perspective, an internet troll's perspective, it was quite funny, yeah.
Can I touch your hair?
Says this.
Now, by the way, did you know, I'm pretty sure that I have this right. I'm pretty sure that a little boy who's Black asked President Obama if he could touch his hair. And I believe, and I think there's like a little film of it. Could I touch, President, because it was more like, are you really like me kind of thing. I'm pretty sure I have that right.
Okay.
But there's film of that. I don't know who asks if they can, I mean, certainly as a little girl, I mean, I always had hair until I was 50, actually, hair down clear past my butt. And
wow.
people were always, sort of like, pulling on my ponytail, and they didn't ask, believe me. And this went on until I was 50. I mean, this went on until, so.
Seriously?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because it was kind of big hair, because so yeah, my ponytail or whatever, and it was all the way down my back. So
that's quite funny. I've had this in, like, Japanese students have said this to me many times. Can I touch your hair?
That they wanted to touch your hair?
Yeah, and do you know what I say?
Do you say yes? Go ahead. Whatever.
No, like seriously, look, as long as everything is working in class, as long as you're engaging with the work, you're
not getting up in the middle of class and walking in the front of the room, can I touch your hair? That would be completely...
I wouldn't care then. If they've got a project, right? If I've assigned them to do something and they're
I meant while you were lecturing.
While I'm lecturing,
excuse me.
But you know what? If they did, I would probably just say, okay. Right.
Can we get this over with? Yeah.
Yeah, you finished now? Okay, thank you. I let kids do anything in my class. So do they want to have like cup ramen? Again, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? Great. Anything else, I don't care. I really don't care.
There's a lot of spillages when they bring the food and drink, though.
Oh, not Japanese students.
No. That's a big
Have you seen what they're like in
It's got to go everywhere. You got to go and get the maintainer, and you got to clean up because there's stuff everywhere.
Not Japanese students. Did you see the last World Cup?
Mm-mm.
When the matches when the Japanese teams were playing, it was on TV afterwards because no other nation would do this, right? In the stadium. And then the match is over. Guess what the Japanese did?
They started cleaning up.
They started cleaning up. Yeah.
Yes, I did see that. Yep, I did see that.
And so, again, context matters, right? So if I can let students have whatever they want in class,
right.
Because A, they won't spill anything because they're careful. B, in the highly unlikely event that they do, they'll always clean up after themselves.
Yeah.
Without my intervention or me doing anything.
Yeah.
So, no.
So on page 14, he's recommending going to human resources. But then he says that human resources is actually not helpful. That they're the police department of corporate America. So it needs reform. So
here is how we know who is likely the target of this fist book. It's probably HR.
Yeah.
And incidentally, HR is where this stuff is really, really rampant at the moment.
Yeah.
When
I went to HR to complain about a colleague making a racist comment, I was told that I'm getting offended too easily. I was written up for talking too loudly on the phone one day. Giving obviously really bad.
See, the watermelon
examples.
thing. The watermelon thing is really, really, really interesting.
Oh, is there a watermelon? Where's the watermelon thing?
When I went to HR to complain about a colleague making a racist joke about monkeys and watermelons.
Oh, yeah.
See, I had this, right? Like, I had a white person at work accuse me of being racist because I went to go and get my lunch, and I got roast chicken and then sika, which is watermelon, because that was just what I fancied eating. And apparently eating roast chicken and watermelon is racist.
So you eating it?
Yeah, I was eating. Yeah. I don't. Is watermelon racist? I don't.
Yeah, I think I can't tell you the history, but yes, it is associated with black
people.
Yes, anti. Yeah, it's like making fun of black people because black people like watermelon. I don't know. I'm sure if we Googled it, sort of like watermelon
So I'm not allowed
racism or
to.
something.
I'm not allowed to eat watermelon in Japan because some Americans think it
Well,
might be
in
racist.
Japan, I mean, it does seem a bit extreme to you can't eat it in Japan. So, I can't leave. I can't leave the book and search for the watermelon,
I don't know.
racist watermelon thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, it's definitely. So
I have naturally curly hair, and I was told by HR I could wear it like this whenever we are allowed to go back into the office because it's I can't wear it like this.
yeah.
Yeah, because it's just deemed unprofessional. Does
And
that
this
happen?
is oh yeah, this is definitely a thing at schools and stuff where kids have been told that they can't, wear their hair in dreadlocks, or they can't, there was, I think it was a couple of girls in nearby me, but I could have these cases confused, where the girls had hair extensions and braids, and where they do the hair extensions, they actually put a little, like a little metal clip thing. It's like a little, it looks like jewelry. It's like and it
Okay.
covers where the real hair connects to the extensions, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the excuse that they used, that was like jewelry that they couldn't wear and play basketball or something, even though they pulled their hair all into a knot. And recently, I think in Texas, there was a kid who, again, always he pulled his hair back, but it was long, and he was told it was inappropriate and,
I've
against the
never,
school policies and stuff.
I've
So
never understood this.
it's
Definitely a
definitely a
thing.
thing. Yeah. Um,
It is in Japan, by the
so
way. Sometimes mixed-raced kids who have fair hair, or even Japanese, because Japanese overwhelmingly have black hair, but there are some 100% pure Japanese people who will have a lighter shade of brown. It does happen from time to time. I've known them to tell me stories of being at school and being told that they had to dye their hair black.
Oh, or accusing, anybody accuse them of dyeing their hair not
Often they would
like
accuse
a
them of
lighter
dyeing.
color? Yeah.
Often they would accuse them of dyeing their hair. Sometimes they will require a doctor's note to show that their hair has not been dyed. And
Wow.
then
Wow.
sometimes they will be told that it doesn't matter anyway. You must dye your hair black. Yeah, and it happens even to mixed race kids, and sometimes even to foreigners. I knew of a woman who was working in a Lithuanian woman who was working in a chain restaurant, and she was required to dye her hair black. I don't know if they still do, but I know that the parent company of Disneyland used to, maybe they still do, used to require all members of all staff at Disneyland Tokyo to dye their hair black.
Wow.
Yeah, one of my students worked there, and she came in with because she was mixed race and she had to dye her hair black, and she came in with the pamphlet that had the hair color code things and the rest of it. So yeah, that happens. And that's not good, by the way. You shouldn't be required. No.
So human resources leadership should complete unconscious racial bias training. Well,
No, it doesn't exist.
Review their policies and procedures and eliminate the racist ones. Absolutely. Yes. Recruit and hire more BIPOC for HR roles. Maybe.
Don't discriminate on the basis of your skin color. Whatever it is.
Exactly. Create a policy around racism and racial justice that makes every HR employee accountable. I don't think you can make an HR employee accountable for, everything. Makes every HR employee accountable for what happens. I mean, again, they're not the CEO. They're like this, they're just a worker bee, right? I mean, I don't want to be held accountable for every single thing that happens in my department,
I love the last one.
Interview your BIPOC employees and ask them what they want from an HR department. Yeah.
Oh, I wish they did that at my last university.
Oh yeah,
because they would have told them to go to hell.
Yeah.
I'll
tell you what I want. I want you to die.
I want you to shut the fuck up about all of this critical social justice nonsense. That's what all of them would have said. It was so hilarious. Like, I was persecuted for being racist by white people, and all of the ethnic minority people were behind me and against them. And so I wish they had interviewed those people.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't, because they know the answer that they would have got, right? They know that they would have said that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So he's asking people to, allow BIPOC people to be themselves at work. Yeah, I think that's
Which
and
includes not being woke, by the way.
exactly.
Exactly.
If they don't want to fight in the fight club,
Yeah.
they shouldn't have.
Or if they
Yeah,
want to fight against the Fight Club, that's okay. By the
that's
way,
okay
if
too.
they think that if
Exactly.
they agree with me and they think that this is a load of nonsense, because it is overwhelmingly, then they should be perfectly entitled to make that observation. And
Call out
without you
Michael.
calling them white, by the way, because then they, the next thing is to say, oh, these are black voices for white supremacy.
Right. Right.
No.
Yeah. Call out microaggressions as soon as you see them.
Don't do that.
No, please don't do that. Address racism concerns with leadership. Okay. Be an anti-racism mentor. Do you know your stuff? He's asking, do you know your stuff as an
Yeah, better than you
anti-racist?
do.
If so,
Better than you do.
If so, why not take on one or more of your white coworkers? Take them under your wing and help them on their journey. Explain the problems. Talk about how to support BIPOC. So, and then he's got what can leadership do? And he's asking, approaching BIPOC. So this is page 19. Approaching BIPOC. Did I offend a BIPOC? Yes. Use the ally technique. And the ally technique is, I'm truly sorry. I hear you. I know that that I was disrespectful or whatever, and I shouldn't do it. And I'm really looking forward to learning from you.
This is actually, so the first part is wrong. Sorry, by woke standards. So
yes.
He's made a mistake here. You shouldn't highlight intent, because intent doesn't matter. You focus only, I am sorry that I hurt you. And in fact, raising intent is generally considered to be a microaggression.
Yes.
Right? Because you're undermining their lived experience. So he's got his wokery wrong there because he doesn't know his stuff. So I hear you. Yep, that's perfect. That's good wokery. I know that is something I shouldn't do going forward. I'm an ally in training and I'll keep showing up and we'll do, but that's very good wokery.
So this is like, I'm an alcoholic and I'll always be an alcoholic, and, sort of that, it's that, I'm a racist, I'll always be a racist. I'm still in training,
Yeah.
Of course, if I'm
Christian.
white, I can't ever be. Yeah.
Well, so no, but it's Christian. And so like the whole Alcoholics Anonymous thing is very Christian as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's based upon this notion of kind of, I'm a sinner, so my sin is gluttony, and I will never be free of gluttony as a sin, even if I don't participate in it. Fuck not participating in gluttony.
I'm really looking forward to learning from you and supporting you.
So, cringe.
So did I offend a BIPOC? No. Nice. Keep up the good work.
But here's the thing. This is racist. You are not treating Black people as human beings. You are treating them as if they are a category, an abstraction, an absurd abstraction. And if I was a Black person and somebody was talking to me like this, I would feel awful. I'd be, why aren't you?
Yeah.
I'm James, by the way.
Now get this. Did the BIPOC forgive you? So it's not even did the BIPOC forgive you? Yes. Cool. Keep learning and listening. No.
So they have all of the answers.
Apologize again and remove yourself from the situation. Did you feel like quitting being an anti-racist? Yes. It's normal to get your feelings hurt when someone is mean to you. But remember, this isn't about you. If you let it bother you that to the point of quitting, you were never an ally to begin with. So if you apologize and the person says, well, screw you, then, and you're offended by that, you've apologized twice and they don't, the BIPOC doesn't respond appropriately, then if that offends you, then you were never an anti-racist to begin
Black
with.
people can be dickheads too.
They can, exactly. And you're allowed to be pissed off about that.
Yes, regardless, there are situations where black people are being horrible to white people for no good reason, and you are allowed to tell them to fuck off and not apologize. Because what I'm serious, because this is a point that people can't get, apparently, that black people are people. They have moral agency, the same as anybody else.
And they are different from one another. They are not
they're not the BIPOC. With like one of those like Borg implants. We are the BIPOC.
So, Doyin finishes by saying, "I'm so happy you took part in the anti-racism fight club. As is the case with any muscle, you need to keep exercising it to ensure that it stays strong. If you have any questions, if you want to reach out, feel free to contact me." And so anyway, and then he does have helpful links, but I don't know that they link to anything. I'm not sure if they actually link.
Yeah, they're just articles, 20 best books. So what have we got? James Baldwin. Oh, yeah, good.
Oh, which one?
The Fire Next Time.
Oh.
Yeah, Malcolm X autobiography.
Okay. The Fire Next Time is awesome.
I don't know this one. I know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
Yes.
You know that? I don't know that.
Yes. Very good book.
Certainly James Baldwin. I don't think he's read James Baldwin, by the way, because he wouldn't be coming out with this kind of nonsense if he had. Number 4, White Fragility. Number 5, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Number 6, Stamped from the Beginning, Kendi. Number 7, So You Want to Talk About Race. Oh, this is awful. By, what's her name? Ijoma Ulu. Me and White Supremacy by this awful fraud, Layla F. Saad. She's awful human being. She's the one who, like, you pay her like loads of money and she'll come to your house and bully you over dinner and tell you what an awful racist you are.
An interventionist.
Yeah, so like they have these white dinner parties where rich liberal white women will pay her and her friend to come along, and then they'll just tell them how awful they are and make them cry, and that's becoming anti-racist. Yeah, so you pay her to come around to your house.
Again, I mean, it's hard to criticize her if people pay her to do it. I mean,
No, there's one thing just being an idiot. Like, come on, okay. So there's one thing thinking you're doing right, but because you're a bit of a dum-dum, perpetuating harmful ideas, which, let's say this guy, the anti-racism fight club bloke, he's probably that. There's another thing to be like, well, let's make hay while we can because this ideology is going out of fashion soon. And that's worse because that actually involves some kind of corruption, some actual fraudulence. And then there's another level of hell, which is actually going around and bullying people and being nasty to people. And I'm willing to forgive a lot, but I'm not willing to forgive that.
Well, the fact that people are willing to pay her to do it, I mean.
And Layla, if you want to come on and have a little chat with me, try and make me cry, happy to have you. You'll find me the least conflict-averse person you've ever met. Toni Morrison, Home, don't know it. One of the Nobel Prize in Literature.
Home? Is it just called Home?
Yeah, it's called Home.
I have not read. I've read a fair amount of Toni Morrison, but not that one.
No, it's about 1950s America, so it's probably about actual horrible racism that happened then. Very good. Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me. He's an unbelievably good writer who doesn't know how to think. Well, he just doesn't. He hates white people. The Color of Law, Forgotten History. Ta-Nehisi Coates also recently came out in solidarity with Hamas. So
yes, I saw
lovely bloke. After women and small children have been dragged off to be raped, babies decapitated, lots of people murdered, even people at a peace festival, and his instinct is to come out in favor of resistance by any means necessary on behalf of Hamas, a group who are actually oppressing Palestinians. whatever. Nasty human being, but a great writer. The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America by Race, by Richard Rothstein. Yeah, I have no idea. Probably good. The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison.
Oh, very good book. Very good book.
Good.
Yeah.
Becoming by Michelle Obama.
Very awesome.
Is it good?
Just
really?
Yes. Very, very good.
Did she write it? Or was it ghostwritten?
Yes.
She actually wrote it?
Yes.
Okay.
It's very good.
Eloquent Rage by Brittany Cooper. One of the most prominent voices in emerging feminist literature. Actually, some of Black feminism is quite good. I've not read this one. It's about being angry and being Black as a woman. Okay.
That's probably why you haven't read it. Wouldn't be first on your list.
No, actually, when it comes to like the woke literature, the bit that I'm most deficient in is the feminist side of it. Because I tend to give women a free pass, and I shouldn't. So Layla, I'm not going to give you a free pass. I'm still here. Black dignity in a world made for whiteness. Okay. Just Mercy. Oh, there's Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, which talks about incarceration. And there's lots to disagree with Michelle Alexander on, but it's definitely a book worth reading. Jennifer Harvey, Raising White Kids. No.
Oh.
No.
I think that's pretty
poisonous.
Yeah.
Rennie Edo Lodge, why I'm no longer talking to white people about race. No, awful. White Like Me, Reflections on Race from a Privileged Son. If you want to see what it looks like when somebody really owns their white privilege, then look no further than Tim Wise. Or don't.
Yeah.
20 children's books to help foster conversation. Okay, and before I click the link, is Anti-Racist Baby number 1? Let's see if Anti-Racist Baby is in there.
Well, his own books might be number 1.
Yes, you're right. What's the difference? Something happened. I obviously haven't read any of these. It's a book on Frederick Douglass.
Okay.
Do you reckon they have Tommy Goes to Harvard? Have you heard of that one? It's a black kids book about black people. Tommy Goes to Harvard is about Thomas Sowell, a very influential, as you know.
Sure.
But I bet he's not in there.
Yeah.
Wrong sort of black
they
person.
wouldn't like him. No.
They wouldn't like him. No.
No.
The Day You Begin, Sit In. Can I Touch Your Hair? Come on, if kids are doing this, this is perfectly innocent. The answer is yes. Woke.
I wonder if that is about the kid. It's like a little Obama.
Irene and Charles have been assigned to work together on a 5th grade poetry project, but they do not know each other, and they're not sure if they'll get along. Yeah. 8 to 12. Okay. The Good Kind of Trouble. Ghost Boys. Clean Getaway, For Black Girls Like Me. This is all kind of really identitarian stuff, isn't it? Betty Before X. Voice for Freedom. Fannie Lou Harter fought for equal voting rights. See, some of this looks like it would be quite good.
Yeah.
Stars Beneath Our Feet seems fairly benign. Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. Great Depression.
Really good. Really good book.
Yeah.
Really good book.
This book is anti-racist. I have no idea, but sounds awful. March. Yeah, this is about civil rights. Martin Luther King. So something probably worth reading. So yeah, I mean, there's a mixture of kind of liberal, colorblind, anti-racist stuff in there. Ooh. Not that he would know because he doesn't think. Yeah. And some kind of critical social justice. 7 ways which we know systemic racism is real. Well, it just seems like this is, oh, for God's sake. 7 ways. The website, they've shared something that was done by Ben and Jerry's corporate PR.
Nuh-uh.
No, seriously, this is one of his references. The top is Ben and Jerry's ice cream flavors. Where to buy? What's new? 7 ways we know systemic racism is real.
Oh my God.
Oh my God, what are they? Healthcare, so it's just more surveillance, housing, criminal justice, education, employment. So it's more kind of correlation, causation, confusion. Netflix's Black Lives Matter TV shows and films. Oh God. 7 documentaries. Link broken. Can't say anything about that. Explaining white privilege. Page not found. Can't say anything about that. How to confront male fragility and white fragility with empathy. Page not found. Link broken. Again, we're not criticizing him for that because that's not his responsibility. But put a reference in and we could find it, right?
Right.
And then there's a video of him. Look. Yeah, racism from the perspective of a non-threatening black man.
That's his TEDx talk. Yeah. So, and I'll link to that and the and Coleman Hughes's talk. And our Will Reily thing, and maybe the McWhorter Glenn Lowery thing where they're talking about Ibram X Kendi, because it's a similar. It's a I like the back and forth.
And I also want to point out, just before we close, I mean, this is awful. I mean, the arguments contained are comical, they are silly, they are unfortunately also dangerous, because people have paid a lot of money for this kind of program to be implemented in workforces, which
and participants, I mean, get asked questions.
Yeah.
About, to respond, and would they how would they feel comfortable responding honestly? I mean, I don't know how.
Especially if they're black. Especially if they're black.
Yeah. So.
Well, not especially, including black people.
Yeah. And so this is, training that is being offered, so first of all, he's arguing that HR needs to get their asses in gear, right? But this is the kind of stuff that HR just, hires out and pays, perhaps an astonishingly obscene amount of money for this. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that I'm glad that somebody sent it to us and that we could talk about, like, this is what diversity training
it's compelled indoctrination, like. Compelled indoctrination into demonstrably false ideas that demonize sets of human beings who are not guilty of any of the things that you are alleging they are, and then saying that if you don't go along with this demonization, again based on faulty reasoning and evidence that doesn't support the claims that he makes, then you are yourself to be demonized as well. It's incredibly divisive. It's dangerous. Being charitable, I'm just going to say he's an idiot. Maybe he's just a grifter as well, who's making hay while the sun shines, as you pointed out. But I mean, there's no way that he is up there with the malevolent grifters or true believers, because if he was, he'd do a better job. And there's been a couple of sections in this where I've pulled him up and said, no, from a woke point of view, this is wrong. This is where you would do it. This is how you would do it if you knew your stuff. He doesn't even know his own stuff, which again is not uncommon. We often find this. We often find advocates for critical social justice don't know their own stuff. But finally, I would like to say that while this is indicative of the kind of dumbed down critical race theory that is sadly, the most influential variant of it, because it's so easy to understand. Again, and it's easy to understand because it's dumb, equally dangerous, but dumb. There are more nuanced versions of critical race theory the advocates of which who would strongly object to a lot of the stuff that he has said in here on very similar lines to the way in which I've objected to it. So I don't want to kind of dismiss a whole group of academics. I mean, even academics that I have very little time for, like Kimberly Crenshaw, who is the origin point of intersectionality, would not evaluate that highly. Mm-hmm. I would be very surprised if she did. But certainly, there are plenty of critical race theory scholars who have absolutely no time for Robin DiAngelo and Ibram X Kendi, and those are his two main references throughout this book. Apart from one,
and we're calling it a book very loosely.
He calls it a book. Yeah, it's a pamphlet.
He calls it a book. Yes.
We're calling it a book because he calls it. It's a pamphlet, really. It'll take you 25 minutes to read if you can find it. And then the other piece of evidence he uses comes up with some impressive stats that we have no idea. Well, we have little idea as to whether the methodology is any good, because the methodology section is essentially empty and there are no links to the questions, or at least no links that we could find to the questions that they asked, and no link to any proper methodology. It just basically said this is mixed methods. We have no idea of whether it's rigorous. And generally speaking, if people don't include that, then it's not likely to be great.
You kind of might assume not so great. Yeah.
And yet, nevertheless, white supremacy is so bad that some of the richest companies in America paid a hell of a lot of money for that, in all likelihood, very shoddy research.
Probably also their virtue signaling.
Yeah, of course, right? But it kind of like disproves the idea that white supremacy is everywhere, because they feel the need to go along with this patently absurd nonsense. And I think that this again, it's not indicative of the best scholarship within critical social justice, within critical race theory. And I believe that those people, and I know that you're out there, by the way, and I believe that those people do need to have a seat at the table. But guys, come on. You know that this stuff is out there too. And you know that sadly, it's more impactful than the much higher quality work that you're doing, because the stuff that you're doing is intelligent. And we can disagree, but it is intelligent. And
and they should be offended by this also.
They should be more than offended by this. If you're the metaphor I always give you, if you're an aficionado of horror movies, if that's really your thing, your favorite movie will be something like The Exorcist, which is a masterpiece. But the movie that you hate the most will be a really, really bad horror movie, because you care about the genre. If you care about critical race theory, if you really think that it deserves a seat at the table, and I'm happy to agree with you and fight shoulder to shoulder with you. I'm not one of these James Lindsay types who would dismiss the whole movement as being evil. Then you have to disown this stuff, because unfortunately, people aren't doing what Elizabeth and I are doing, which is being at pains to point out that while this stuff is the most influential form of the argument and therefore needs fighting the most, that there is better stuff out there. While we're able to point that out, the likes of Chris Rufo, who is more influential than we are, because again, same reason, he dumbs everything down, right? So therefore people can understand it. He's winning. He's making it look like critical race theory is all this nonsense that we are seeing here. You have to fight back against it as well. Otherwise they will win. But yeah, join us in fighting against dangerous ideas.
Those of you who are still with us after 3 hours and 4 minutes.
Quite. But then again, like actually, ironically, like long podcasts are often the ones that. How did we spend so much time talking about such an awful piece of work?
I don't know. I guess perhaps guilt.
Yeah.
We felt somewhat. We felt that we needed to do it justice, not to just say, oh, this is terrible.
Right. So. And that's a good point. Okay. So even though this is a terrible piece of work, we have dissected this in forensic detail, and we've probably spent more time reflecting upon it and talking upon it than he took to write it. So I think we should call this something like a forensic dissection of woke I don't know, woke indoctrination, indoctrination, coercive indoctrination, coercive woke. No, because it is coercive, right? Because he's saying you disagree with me, otherwise you're evil, basically racist. So it's coercive. It's indoctrination because it's requiring you to agree with a certain set of political points of views. So yeah. All right. So thank you very much for listening. Hopefully you got something out of this. Hopefully this can be, in your own way, a kind of fist book, right? So that you can go through these arguments and dissect things how we've dissected it, and really be able to push back on this kind of stuff, because there are 1,000,001 versions of this out there. And these are just like all of the bad ideas just being recycled uncritically. Good. Thank you very much.